that is used by its users to share content. And the very reason why New Zealand has decided to have a law like that is because New Zealand was the largest shareholder in New Zealand Telecom, which is the largest ISP in New Zealand. And obviously, the New Zealand government did not want any criminal sanctions against the executives of the government-owned ISP. So these very protections in New Zealand are in place and should have protected me. However, as you all know, my family was raided in a massive military-style raid with 72 armed police officers, the special tactic group, which is only deployed in terrorist situations or hostage situations. They arrived at my property with 2 helicopters and attack dogs, and it was a massive undertaking. And you can, of course, find the videos on YouTube in my YouTube channel if you want to have a look at what they did. But even worse, they spied on me. They used the GCSB, which is one of the 2 major New Zealand spy agencies, to spy on my family. And the way they have done it is very intrusive. What we know today is that they used my mobile phone, my iPhone, as an open mic. So for over a month, at least that was the original admission by the GCSB, did they spy on me. And they spied on my communications, and we know that they used my iPhone to do that. In addition to that, they installed a system that allows, basically acts as a cell tower. And all phones that were connected in or around the mansion, so including my neighbors, visitors, guests, they came over, business meetings that I had, they were all connecting to a system called Stingray, which the New Zealand government uses to surveil an entire area around, for example, the mansion. So not only did they spy on me, incidentally, they also spied on a large number of other New Zealanders who came to visit me, who had meetings with me, my employees. We had 52 people at the mansion working there. So all these people were affected by this spying. And only recently, after 5 years of waiting, we finally had a court hearing to determine if we can have an open hearing about these matters, or if it all has to be secret, if the submissions can be secret. And the government claimed national security, and they did not want any of this to be public and any of the hearings to be open to the New Zealand public or the New Zealand media. And their reasoning is that, potentially the processes, the methods that they have used could be exposed by an open hearing. But that is, of course, not true, because Edward Snowden has already released all the documents that show exactly how the Five Eyes spy on people. And the recent disclosures by WikiLeaks around Vault 7 show even deeper how they even use our entertainment devices, like our televisions, our gaming consoles, our home computers, to spy on us. So basically, every device that you have in your home that has a microphone or a camera can be remotely used against you. That is the reality that we live in today, and that has been proven by the disclosures of Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks. So there's no reason for any court to say, the methods need to remain secret because it's a matter of national security. The only reason why the GCSB wants to keep these things quiet and not in the public domain is because there is so much more that we would discover in the court proceedings if we would actually get discovery. Because what I can tell you with certainty is that I'm not the only person who has been spied on by the GCSB unlawfully. We know already of 88 others in the so-called Kittredge report, which investigated this illegal spying. But I'm telling you, there are many more. There are thousands more, maybe even all of New Zealand. Because what the GCSB does, it has sensors in New Zealand that splice directly into the fiber cables, into the fiber network. So everything that traverses over the internet in New Zealand is being picked up by the GCSB. They have other sensors that tap right into every mobile network provider. So if you use a mobile phone in New Zealand, you make a phone call or you send a message, they are right there capturing all of that as well. And then what they do, they share that information with the other Five Eyes partners. And the way they do that, it's all being uploaded and made available in the massive spy cloud that the NSA has built in Utah. It's a data center of massive proportions, like nothing else in the world. They have enough storage capacity to spy on the world population and capture all their emails and all their communications for 50 years. That's how much capacity they have in that data center. And, people don't really understand how advanced these systems are today. Obviously, they are not recording all voice calls and then keeping the originals because the data volume would be too high. What they do in a first step, they transcribe automatically everything that is said in a conversation into text. And then they introduce the text into the database. and they still keep the original communications for quite some time. But if, for example, the text does not reveal anything of interest to the NSA or to any other spy agency, if there are no keywords of interest in your communications, the original audio is discarded after some time, but they keep the transcript of every communication. Every call that a New Zealander makes is transcribed automatically and uploaded as text into the NSA spy cloud. So, people need to understand how intrusive that is, because whenever you are becoming a person of interest, all they have to do, just like a Google interface, they type in your mobile number, they type in your name or your email address, and everything about you, everything that you have said to anyone is available to them, at the very least in the form of transcribed text that is fully searchable and can be used against you. Now, if you ever do say something that is of interest for the NSA, for example, if you are a supporter of WikiLeaks, or if you ever made a donation to WikiLeaks, or you have expressed support for myself or people that are engaged in activism against this kind of privacy intrusion, you yourself are automatically added to a list where all your original communications are kept. So not just the transcript, but the original audio recordings of everything you've ever said. And you are a target where your phone can also be activated as a mic, and your other home devices that have cameras and mics can then be accessed. So you're making it into a pool of persons of interest. Now, this is the reality today. This is how it works, and it's much worse than most people understand. And since this happened against me, I've really read everything. I have a data security background. I was a hacker in my teens. I started a very successful data security business. And I understand how these systems work, because when I was young and I had this business, I was working for Fortune 500 companies and governments. So I knew the early days of these technologies, and I understand exactly how they have advanced and where we are today. And thanks to Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks, we get the full picture of what's happening here. Now, let me explain to you why it is so important that we fight this, because they are not using this system to spy on terrorists. They're telling us they need this to shut down terrorism. They're telling us, if you don't agree with this, the country is in danger and people are going to kill you and all that. But in reality, they use this system, this very powerful system that has cost taxpayers in the Five Eyes Nations hundreds of billions of dollars. They use that against me in a copyright case, which in New Zealand is nothing more than a civil copyright case. And here's the problem for them. Recently, in my appeal hearing in the High Court, a judge has agreed that the New Zealand Copyright Act is not sufficient to establish any kind of crime here in New Zealand based on the allegation of the US indictment. But the judge then went outside of the scope of the Copyright Act and tried to use other laws to justify my extradition. He went outside of the Copyright Act to find something else to allow for my extradition. And there is no precedent to that. This is a novel case here in New Zealand. The law is very clear. There's a safe harbor for ISPs against this kind of stuff. And we're going to win. Ultimately, I'm going to prevail and win, because let me give you one example of the big mistakes that they made. They went to the district court at the very outset of my case, and they had to request warrants to be able to do the raid, to be able to search my home, and to arrest me and to detain me. And when they asked the court for these warrants, they told them that under the New Zealand Copyright Act, what I've done is a crime, and that I could face up to 5 years in jail if I would have done this in New Zealand. And we know today that that isn't true, because in New Zealand it's a purely civil matter. And because the arrest warrants were based on a law that doesn't criminalize the conduct, I will win and they will lose. It's just a matter of time before this is all over. And what that will result in is that we will be able to sue the New Zealand government in civil court. We will get full-scale discovery about everything that they have done. And we will find out exactly why all of this happened, why the NSA was interested in me. And I, of course, already know why they're interested in me, because when I watched Collateral Murder, the famous leak from WikiLeaks about war crimes in Iraq, where helicopter gunships fired on civilians, fired on Reuters journalists, on children, and killed them. And the helicopter pilots and the radio operators were basically joking about it, and were acting completely ridiculously and completely against the law and killing these innocent people. When I saw that, I knew that I need to do something about it. And Mega Upload became a major donor to WikiLeaks. I was so upset, not only that the US government went into Iraq and Afghanistan based on lies, on WMDs that they knew never existed, but then when they were there, they were just shooting at everyone like it's target practice, like they're little targets that you can just eliminate and wipe out, and children die every day because of this conduct. And I said, enough is enough. And, I think what WikiLeaks is doing is glorious. It's so important. It's heroic. We get to see the truth about what the dark forces are doing in our world. And that's why I supported them. And that is one of the reasons why I became a target to the US government, because I became a large supporter of WikiLeaks financially and also verbally. But then, a perfect storm happened, because the other problem was that the president of the United States, Obama at the time, he was running for his second term, and he was trying, of course, to win another 4 years in the White House. And Hollywood was putting him under intense pressure to do more against piracy. So it was a perfect storm for me. Not only did the deep state want me to, go down for my support of WikiLeaks, now a powerful lobby group, the lobby group that represents Hollywood, went to the White House and said, if you don't do something against piracy, we're not going to support you for your re-election campaign. And Hollywood is one of the largest donors to the Democratic Party. Obama raised over $100 million from those people. And Hollywood also controls about 90% of the US mainstream media. So everything that you are seeing right now, what's happening to Trump and all this aggressive action against him by 90% of the mainstream media in the US, is actually Hollywood saying, we don't like this president. Okay, so Obama was right to be fearful to do something against me, or else he has these very powerful people that could destroy his hopes to get reelected. And what Obama did was two things. He supported the Stop Online Piracy Act, which was a very aggressive piece of legislation that would have allowed for large-scale censorship of the internet. And they started the investigation against Mega Upload, a novel criminal case that has never happened before and never happened since, which shows you that it was really a test case. And we did stop the Online Piracy Act, the Stop Online Piracy Act, by blacking out the entire internet. Aaron Schwartz was involved in that. He spearheaded that, and he paid with his life because he aggressively fought against these intrusions, and they used the law as legal warfare to grind him down and to destroy his life. I'm one of the people that now has to deal with this targeting by Hollywood. And you need to understand these are commercial interests. These are people who pay politicians money to get what they want, to get new legislation, and now paramilitary action against an innovator, a computer nerd, somewhere halfway around the world in New Zealand. And the New Zealand government became a puppet to all of this power mongering by the United States and went along with it. And even when they found out that they messed up, that they got it all wrong, they covered it up. They kept going, and 5.5 years later, I'm still fighting for my family to be freed from this injustice, and I'm fighting to expose the truth. And part of that fight, for me personally, was the foundation of the Internet Party, a political movement that I hope is going to be a global movement that is going to fight against these aggressive intrusions, fights against the power of money in politics, and fights especially against the undermining of our basic human rights by these incredibly powerful, arrogant, illegal spy agencies that have become the world's largest criminal conspiracy to undermine our rights, to undermine the law, and to destroy those that don't agree with the state. And I will stand up to that for as long as I live. I know Julian and Edward are going to do the same. Barrett will do the same. There are many people organizing around the world to fight this injustice, and we are just at the beginning. And those people who do this to us, I have a message for you. You better be very worried, because the people are going to understand more and more about what you do, and we are going to take you down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Millions of people around the world have been really moved by what you've been put through. And in a strange way, it's turned out to be a good thing, in that it has resulted in so many people learning more about what has been going on. And because we have learned more, we can devise ways together to tackle it and to take it on. So I know that your family has been through hell in the last 5 years, but I also know that movements like this probably wouldn't have happened if things hadn't unfolded the way they did. So thank you for being a part of this and for educating everyone. Okay, guys, so I promised you we would have appearances by activists and other people from around the Five Eyes nations. So we're going to move on from New Zealand now to the next country closest to home for us, which is Australia. So we have kindly had videos contributed to us from the campaign to close Pine Gap. Pine Gap is the Australian Five Eyes spy station. It's the Aussie version of New Zealand's Waihopai spy base. And then secondly, we have a video from an Australian activist who has been protesting the notoriously despicable offshore immigration detention centres at Manus Island. So our host now will play those videos for you, and then you'll come back to me.
Hey, I'm Margaret. I'm one of the Hey, I'm Margaret. I'm one of the Pine Gap pilgrims I'm just going to sit down and tell you the story of what we've been up to this last year. But the Pine Gap Pilgrims are a group of 6 people. We went into Pine Gap to lament and pray. Pine Gap is a huge war-making facility in Alice Springs in the centre of Australia, and it's there for a reason. It's there because it's out of sight and it's secret, and it takes in intelligence, military intelligence, but now not only military intelligence, also civil intelligence. It's part of the Five Eyes network, and it takes in intelligence from every keystroke, they reckon. So we're being watched, we're being recorded, we're being processed, and there's a lot of opportunities that offers the powers that be for repression and further oppression. For me, I'm interested in the military side.
You'll find you're getting audio.
Yeah, there's no audio, Joe.
In the way that it facilitates war making by the US as a global military power. And I'm interested in Australia's role in assisting the US and being the US sheriff in this area, but in the global sphere. And I was part of a group, the Pine Gap Pilgrims. We've worked together before on other anti-military projects, but in this project we're a bunch of 5 Christians and a pagan, so we're a spiritual group. We look to changing things using creative action, and in this case what we did was go to lament at Pine Gap, and we wanted to see it with our eyes. It's hidden away in a
So let's move on now to the USA and welcome Barrett Brown. You know, many people are excited to see you here, Barrett. Are you with us?
Hello, yeah, I don't have video at the moment. I think you'll have to turn it back on.
I'll give you a minute. So we have with us Barrett Brown. He's one of the foremost experts on the issue of the commercialization of spying and the targeting of activists and journalists, including himself. He has been extensively persecuted by them, and yet he has triumphed regardless. Barrett is possibly the only journalist to win some of the most prestigious journalism awards in his country while being in solitary confinement. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Barrett Brown.
Thank you very much for having me. Today I want to talk about a little bit what we've already discussed regarding the situation with our respective nation states Briefly, let me just give you my background. I was a journalist. I got involved with Anonymous towards the end of 2010 when they were helping to assist the Tunisian revolution. And shortly after I got involved there, we had a run-in with an intelligence contractor. This is one of the many firms that's arisen, especially in the U.S., that cater to the U.S. government, its intelligence and military establishment and law enforcement, as well as governments abroad and private interests, corporations and that sort of thing. So because of this altercation that arose between Anonymous and this particular intelligence contractor, there was a raid in which Anonymous stole 70,000 emails from a firm called H.B. Gary. Those emails revealed a massive and very bizarre plot set in motion by the Department of Justice itself to go after activists and to go after journalists who were deemed supportive of WikiLeaks, as well as some other just random left-wing groups that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce opposed. They were going to use techniques that, had any of us done them, we would have been charged for. They were, in some cases borderline illegal, in some cases explicitly illegal. But of course, none of them were ever charged for it. Instead, even though this fellow had to resign, this contractor fellow, and even though a investigation was called for in the House of Congress, on the floor of Congress, the FBI went after us, and particularly me. And I was under surveillance for a while, and then I was raided, and my mother was raided. My mother was threatened with charges, and I made some declarations online that I was going to use the same tactics that these intelligence contractors had used against us on the lead FBI agent in my case, and then we would see if they're illegal when I do them, or if they're still legal when the other fellow does them. And of course, I was raided for that, and thereafter charged for these other issues. I had copied and pasted a link from one chat room to another after the Stratford hack, when I was going over stolen emails to get my investigations for the articles that I was writing. And they charged me for that, saying that because some of these files, unbeknownst to me, were credit card numbers, that I had engaged in massive credit card fraud, even though their own forensics showed that I never opened the file myself, etc. Those charges were eventually dropped. I depleted some other things and went to prison for 4 years. While there, I tried to document the U.S. prison system's very unusual due process situation. Short version is it doesn't really exist. And got out about 9 months ago and have set about since then trying to build up a new framework, something that will take the agility that we've seen, the potential for mass collaboration online, build upon the central fact in the 21st century, which is that any individual can now collaborate with any other individual across the planet for the first time in history. It's my opinion that we don't know what that means yet, that we're very early on in the information age, and we have not yet grasped the full implications of what it means to be in an environment entirely different from the environment in which our nation states, our institutions grew up. These institutions were built in part because of the limitations that we had on collaboration. Those limitations no longer exist. The environment's changed. That means there a period of a global correction will be occurring over the next several decades. I want to take full advantage of that. I want to ensure that people who are opposed to the police state, opposed to the drug war, opposed to the surveillance state, and respects individual rights and the rights of others, have an advantage over these institutions and nation states that don't necessarily hold those views. And to that end, the pursuant system, which you can see, you can learn more about at pursuantproject.org, will be implemented in the next few months on an invitation basis. We'll be bringing on several hundred people who who selected as having backgrounds in activism, academia, journalism, research, and allow them to build up their own entities, their own collaborative entities. Everyone will have the equal right to create and grow these little groups that we call pursuances for various ends, and they'll be able to connect amongst each other. Eventually, we suspect this will lead to the development of a refined yet vast superorganism, a civic entity spanning the globe and capable of confronting criminalized nation states wherever necessary. This kind of thing, I think, is inevitable. And we've actually had some great successes simply because of how clearly the situation has deteriorated in the U.S. and elsewhere. Our institutions, from law enforcement to the presidency to Congress, no longer maintain much respect, from the citizenry. that's a window of opportunity. That means that people with other ideas can now get those ideas seriously considered. And as proof, we've been able to recruit some somewhat mainstream people into this project, and I'll announce more about that later on in the my next Intercept column, which will go over the board of directors and all that good stuff. So meanwhile, the issues, there are a lot of issues that, around the world we've tried to emphasize. Obviously, the Internet Party and other similar organizations, including the pirate parties and whatnot, have quite correctly concentrated largely on the surveillance state. There is an array of propaganda technologies, some of which we learned about via these hacks that Anonymous did, and which we obviously figured out more of after Snowden released further NSA documents that I think are a fundamental issue. They are an issue of concern to everyone who has an agenda that is contrary to the agenda of powerful interests across the world. Sort of the common agenda of nation states: security, order, the ability to and the inclination to view citizens as just another factor, something to be considered and gotten around if necessary. There are so many new technologies and new methodologies, some of which are old methodologies that are now been refined, that because of the internet, because of the nature of the internet, can now be pursued in ways that would have been unimaginable to the greatest tyrants of the 20th century. Persona management is one of the technologies that was revealed in this H.B. Gary hack, and it's something we pursued afterwards with my group, Project PM, which was intent on overseeing the investigation into these things. Persona management involves the ability of a single operator to control like 15 to 20 fake online people, complete with very complete backgrounds, social media presence, obviously, but also a software that helps to maintain conversations, maintain consistency in communication, not just translating to other languages if necessary, but even maintaining a particular linguistic cadence. We know a bit about what its capabilities are because we saw the CENTCOM's request for applications that this company had responded to. We later figured out which company had won that contract. And from their request and from patents that we later discovered involving IBM and some military people from years back, as well as tax filings, we were able to get a sense of what they can do with this. And if you're familiar at all with the history of law enforcement engaging in infiltration, false flags, agents, profiteers, all that sort of thing, you know how dangerous that capability can be. And my concern is that capability to alter, to manufacture events and to alter perceptions, that will be vastly enhanced over the next years, because you have so many companies who it's in their economic interest to develop these technologies, and we have the U.S. government and others encouraging those technologies. And we've also seen a great deal about what these companies like Fisher in Europe and this other one out of Italy that was exposed a few years ago, plus most of them in the U.S., who they've been willing to work with. And they've been willing to work with Bahrain, for instance. We've got a company called Corvus that is happy to do propaganda for the Kingdom of Bahrain to discredit activists who are risking their lives trying to establish democracy there. We've seen, Fisher having served the Egyptian governments and other tyrannies to go after their own people. So we know that there's motivation there. We know there's will. We know there is an economic impetus. And we know that even when these things have been caught out, even when we, for instance, were managed to expose an indefensible conspiracy against our very democracy, that no one is really going to suffer any consequences. Well, on the other hand, obviously, those of us who are involved in exposing them will suffer the ultimate consequences. We'll have our families threatened. We'll be harassed. We'll be jailed, imprisoned, pursued by irregular charges, subjected to all sorts of, very newish, very cutting edge propaganda techniques. We saw from one of Snowden's documents was a GCHQ slide, Britain's spy agency, detailing how they go after Anonymous, what techniques they can use to put this information out, attack people's phones, for instance, something I was having trouble with back in the day. And so this is a difficult situation. It's an uphill battle. And because of that, because it's so hard, even when you get the information out, to get the media at large to pay attention to it and to maintain attention on it for as long as it's necessary to actually get these things addressed, we have to look back at our advantages and what works and what successes we've had in the past, isolate those, look at what deficiencies creep into this kind of online collaboration, and build upon that. Again, the pursuant system is something that number of people who have been involved in both this online activism and traditional activism and a number of kind of related fields, something we've refined over a long period of time, especially in the last 9 months, to address a lot of the problems that do come up when you have large numbers of people organizing. And so what I'd like to see, regardless of whether or not anyone chooses to contribute to this system, to apply to work in this system, everyone who feels that they have a duty to correct the deficiencies of the states that they support by their tax dollars, everyone should be looking at ways to improve the means of collaboration, to improve how we organize, how we take advantage of what our advantages are. Our advantages are that there are many, many of us, that we have skills running the gamut from every imaginable field. We have collectively a great deal of independent knowledge about certain things that can be pulled. We have extraordinary research skills to the extent that we use collaborative research, crowdsourced research, which we did very successfully with the intelligence contracting investigation. And we have ultimately the ability, just like the unions did 120 years ago, to affect outcomes, so long as we do keep our eyes on the fundamental efficiency of how we do things. And that should always be the emphasis. Each of these other issues can all be better pursued to the extent that we hit those fundamental efficiencies, to the extent that we fundamentally move to the next step in how we organize in the internet age. And obviously parties like the New Zealand Internet Party are a very important portion of that. Institutions exist, and so long as they exist, there's a great deal of hard work that needs to be done within those institutions to keep them afloat, to keep them from going entirely rabid, as they have in my country. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate the work you guys are doing to help free your own country from my country, which is always a difficult endeavor. And I hope everyone will check out pursuanceproject.org and give some thought to signing up and spread the word. And again, even look at developing your own options as well. This is something that's supposed to be, it's intended to be universal. It's intended to work with whatever it is that you have going on, whatever your projects are. It's something that should facilitate that ideally. But I think it's just the first step, or the next step rather, in a long process that we'll see over the next decades, where we really begin to build up formidable entities up to the task, up to the challenges before us, because the challenges are obviously extraordinary. And we're not the only ones who understand the internet. A lot of the governments understand the internet, and that's a problem. That means our understanding has to be just as equal as theirs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barrett. Barrett, you told us a little bit about pursuance. Can you tell us what stage is it at? When are you expecting your 1.0 to be released? And are you guys going commercial mass market, or are you going to have different versions for activists and people who are more of a threat? I'm really interested to hear some more about pursuance, because I know there are a lot of people working behind the scenes on it right now.
We have what's called the minimum viable product being produced, and this is all being done open source. It's got a GitHub page and all that. So we'll be experimenting with this with some early participants later in a few months, and kind of just working out the kinks. And then over time, we'll be bringing in more people who have signed up, who have applied. We have other people that we're actually going after as well, like asking them, hey, we want you in the system. And each of them will be able to bring on other people. Anyway, so as time goes on, we'll add more features. The bare bones version itself should be a improved procedure over how we organize these things so far. I mean, back when I worked with Anonymous and back when we had Project PM, this was all done out of IRC channels, which is fine. You had collaborative type pads, and that works for some things, but it also brings its own dangers. So we want something where everyone will be able to define the terms of their relationships in a more formal way, where everyone is on the same page. So if everyone can come in and create a group, everyone has that right, and to define how that group expands and to delegate power to the extent they want to. Obviously there'll be groups that'll be very democratic. There'll be groups that are more top down, where people are agreeing that I want to work, help this journalist, for instance, do crowdsourcing, or I'm interested in this. So there won't be a lot of energy taken up in philosophical conversations over who gets to do what. Everyone can always create their own pursuance and define it however they want. Anyone who joins a pursuance does so knowing what the agreements are. That's going to keep a lot of that's going to deter one of the big problems that chased out a lot of very capable people from Anonymous, is that suddenly you're dealing with, you don't know who, may not be, who may be someone who's there for their own sort of emotional needs. Activist groups can't be support groups. They have to be vanguard groups. They have to be up to very considerable tasks, and that's not always possible with the conglomeration of just whoever wants to get involved. So free association is very much an emphasis here. The freedom to not associate with as well. So you'll have all these structures, and you'll have people experimenting with these forms, with how you organize things. And over time, you're going to see some templates established. You'll see people that manage to build up a structure that works very well for a particular end. They'll also oftentimes resubmit that to our central library that everyone has access to. And so you'll see the system evolve in that sense. You also see it evolve in the sense that each individual pursuance, each individual group will find areas of collaboration, potential efficiency by working with other groups. So these groups will join up and build up various alliances, based on terms that they both agree to, information sharing, sharing of resources. You'll have groups that are specialized in going around, joining other pursuances briefly to provide them a specialized service, like coding, building up online campaigns, design, that kind of thing, things that many pursuances will only need once or twice. You'll have NGOs and nonprofits that already exist able to better harness their supporters. There's a great line from by Rick Falkruth, founder of the Swedish Pirate Party. I haven't read his book yet, Swarm something, I forgot, but someone quoted this to me. He was telling somebody who, as I think an activist group or a nonprofit, we don't need to be talking about the people who work for you. We need to be talking about the people who want to work for you, but you don't let them. And so this is something that's not just intended for emergent groups to come out of nothing. It's intended to combine that while also allowing the existing institutions that are doing important work to get involved in these same processes in ways that won't necessarily commit much time and no money, but will allow them to take the next step. We've been organizing things fundamentally in the same ways we've been doing it for hundreds of years. Journalism still works the same way journalism worked 100 years ago. You have a writer, an editor, and a fact checker. It doesn't work. Anyone who's been covered quite a bit by the press knows how haphazard the process really is. We have institutions that are still, they have not yet begun to act as if this was an age of potential mass collaboration. And so this is intended to encourage that, to encourage institutions and individual people to start thinking along those lines and to show them what can be done. We have successes we can point to, even with the haphazard methodology that Anonymous used and that sort of thing. Extraordinary successes sometimes. Again, and this is early on. So we can extrapolate that there is a great yield that can be achieved to the extent that we get our shit together as a movement and bring in other movements and bring in nonprofits, bring in institutions, and start waging real war against the array of criminalized nation states that we've inherited from history.
And there's not a whole lot optimistic about these days, but I think you've just achieved it. Barrett, I've just got one last question for you. I know that the harassment of you and the persecution of you continues to this day. I know that there has been summons, or can you just update us about exactly what has happened with The Intercept and with your book publishers? And what do you think is going to happen to you going forward? What are your plans for dealing with these people?
The first run-in I had post-release was when they rearrested me for doing interviews. I had an interview scheduled with Vice Television and then another one the following week with PBS. And the head of the regional BOP, told me that since I was still under BOP, guidance or oversight, I couldn't do interviews. I explained to her that's not true. I referred her to the BOP manual on inmate interactions with the press. So explain that I've done interviews from prison over and over again. No one's made that claim, that no such rule exists. I got her on phone, recorded the conversation, got them threatening me to have me rearrested for doing interviews. And then the next day they did rearrest me. The marshals came and got me. A few days later, a law firm out of New York, that one of my publishers in Dallas for a magazine I write for down here sometimes, the lawyers went to the BOP and challenged the terms of my confinement, threatened to go to the court over it. And rather than have to go in front of a judge and explain why they had rearrested me without doing the proper paperwork or charging me with an infraction, they just released me. And so since then, but anyway, so I got the interviews done. And so there will be several major broadcasts by NPR and PBS and Vice Television over the next few months about the pursuance system. So we'll be getting our good share of attention for that. And then more recently, they sent a subpoena to The Intercept, demanding all communications between myself and The Intercept, demanding all financial records. Sent a similar subpoena a month later to my literary agent in New York, who's handling my book. It'll come out next year. And in both cases, they're claiming that this is being done to make sure I'm paying my restitution properly. Now, I called up one of the people down there at the federal U.S. Attorney's Office and caught her off guard and recorded it and asked her to explain why this is being done. What is this normal, blah, blah, blah. And she was not able to really, I don't think, sufficiently articulate what it was they were doing and what the justification would have been. So that's going apace. We've got, in both cases, their legal teams are responded. In both cases, they told them that no, they're not providing any communications whatsoever. They'll provide the financial records. And meanwhile, I sent an email to all of them, the USDA, my probation officer, et cetera, explaining exactly what my finances were, explaining what payments I've made, explaining that my probation officer does not know anything about what this is. Just to make sure that there's a record of me telling them that. Sometimes they pretend like they're confused about things. Like that time, they charged me with 22 years mandatory minimum for copying and pasting a link that ended up going to credit card numbers under a statute that only that involves identity theft, which doesn't refer to credit card numbers. It refers to government issued IDs. They pretended not to know that credit cards are not government issued IDs, at least not yet. So they have a tendency to kind of do things on purpose and just sort of pretend them away as mistakes. Say, oops, we didn't do that, So I'm always in a rush to kind of document that and make sure everyone's on the same page. In the future, again, like there's not a great deal I can really do to anticipate these things. I just have to be ready to handle them as they come. That's pretty typical here. Beyond that, when my probation is over, as I announced a while back after I was rearrested for doing interviews, I'm going to be leaving the U.S. as soon as my probation is over. I'll eventually be revoking my citizenship because I want nothing to do with this country or its people, frankly. And I'll still be involved in U.S. politics and U.S. activism. I'll just be doing it from somewhere where they can't just come and arrest me illegally whenever they feel like it. And I want to at least put another barrier between myself and this particular empire. So it's the kind of thing that obviously I got used to dealing with years ago, and in prison where I was spent about 6 months altogether being held in a shoe. Had a lot of run-ins with the authorities there, of course. It's just something that it's just cost of doing business in this country.
Thank you so much, Barrett. So many people around the world do understand and appreciate the sacrifice that you've made, and indeed that all of us targets of the surveillance state make every day to circulate the truth. And your writing has brought light to many people, so thank you for that. Okay, guys. So it turns out, as not many people realise, in fact, even a lot of Kiwis don't know this, New Zealand is actually a registered corporation. The country is named after the New Zealand Company, which is a trading company from the 19th century that was operated by British nobility and even a media baron who helped to propagandize the British settlers by literally whitewashing the oppression of the indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and all for the sake of the profit and prestige of the head of the Commonwealth. So it is only fitting for us to now hear from someone who has given the government of Her Majesty the Queen a massive pain in the backside. Hacktivist Lauri Love. Lauri, take it away. Tell us about what has been going on with you.
Okay, hello, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, you look gorgeous and we can hear you.
Okay, right, so first thing, as a descendant and heir of the New Zealand magnate. I need to correct a few. The whole history of colonialism in New Zealand and Australia is worth people paying attention to, and it is far from finished, as you have been hearing with the Five Eyes spying arrangements. And if you'll remember, sometimes if the government is the wrong kind, our government will step in and get rid of it, as happened notably in Australia. So as for my case, like Barrett Brown, I at some point became a person of interest to powers that be in the United States, Department of Justice particularly. And 4 years ago, in October 2013, I was arrested by our National Crime Agency, a newly formed attempt to emulate the FBI in the UK, for obscure reasons, because I don't know why anyone who knows about the FBI would try to emulate them. So they arrested me by pretending to be UPS delivery person to trick their way into our house, and then spent 4 to 5 hours terrorizing my mum and dad, similarly to with Barrett Brown, ransacking the house, taking anything that could possibly store data, and eventually about midnight drove me in a unmarked police car without a seatbelt very fast down country roads to be processed, kept in a cell overnight, and then questioned extensively by a large cohort of these National Crime Agency officers, ostensibly, though I have reason to believe some of them may have been working for the FBI or at least reporting to them. So I was questioned about a series of intrusions, of compromises of US government computer systems, which happened in conjunction with a anonymous campaign after the death of Aaron Swartz to effectively promote some reform of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, under which he was hounded to death for effectively borrowing too many scientific articles from an online archive. Everyone will remember how tragic the end of Aaron Swartz's wonderful and promising life was, and there was a large and emotive response from the internet community to the effect that we should never ever allow this to happen again, and some serious questions need to be asked about why it did happen. Those efforts to understand and fix the system are ongoing. The ones through the official channels seem to have somewhat stalled at the moment, but there are a lot of campaigners and activists who are trying to continue to fix this. One effort, as I said, came in the form of an anonymous hacktivist campaign where some website for the United States Sentencing Commission was defaced with a video, and I think from what I recall from the stories, you could play asteroids on it for a bit, which seems like a more useful purpose for it than explaining to judges how to ruin people's lives. I was released on bail without charge because, strangely enough, they didn't find any evidence that I was involved in any way in this campaign. So I was kept on bail for the National Crime Agency. Obviously, my passport was nicked and I didn't have my computers. I still don't have my computers despite not being charged in the UK and it being nearly 4 years. I'm politely asking for them back via the court system, but they've cleverly put off that civil court action until after my extradition hearing, where there is a significant possibility I won't be able to fight it because I'll be in a small box in America or dead. But anyway, so 2 years later, in July of 2015, by this point I'd been released from bail. I had my passport. I had successfully gone to the Chaos Computer Conference in Hamburg, where it was at the time, which was fantastic, where I met Sarah Harrison from WikiLeaks and a number of other very fantastic people. And I just thought the remaining battle was to get my computers back, because my theory is the government shouldn't be able to take away someone's entire digital estate, all of their digital possessions and property, personal documents, photographs, software projects, correspondence with journalists, potentially information of high crimes and misdemeanors, legally professionally privileged correspondence with journalists and government figures, etc., hypothetically, and not return it and not return the hardware from which it was stolen, despite not actually having the powers to do so. And the law is very clearly on my side, and I will win the case when they finally get around to giving me the right to have my day in court, which they were very clever about avoiding so far. But the point of this was in July of 2015, some remarkably similarly dressed and hairstyled burly men turned up with kind of work-related trainers on, and I had an ominous premonition that I would not be having a great day. And true enough, they said, we're from the Metropolitan Police Extradition Unit. We're here to take you back to America, which is the way they put it, because ordinarily they are apprehending people who have fled justice, usually from Europe, in the UK, and almost 9 out of 10 times they are taken back, and they then answer in the court system where they're accused of committed crimes. So I spent the long drive to London explaining to them that I've never been to the United States of America, therefore I can't go back, and this isn't an ordinary case. They want to lock me up for the rest of my life for things which definitely weren't in violation of US law, because they didn't happen. There was no crime that could have been committed in America, and really, they should be talking to the National Crime Agency and the Crown Prosecution Service about why I wasn't charged and taken through our relatively functional and humane court system here in the UK. This was all lost on them. Their job was effectively delivery, and they said that they would get me back this evening, which, being incredibly naive and foolish, I believed. So I didn't take this thing, for instance, which keeps me alive if my lungs start to seize up, or a book to read in the police station, where I ended up for a day and a half, or my passport, or my wallet, or my telephone, or any of the other things you should probably try and take with you if you're being kidnapped and they give you 5 minutes to grab some things. The reason I didn't get all these things is they were worried that they would try and seize computers, so I was trying to kind of get out of there before that occurred to them. So I was taken to a police station. I was processed through Westminster Magistrates Court, which handles extradition cases. I was granted bail on the condition that my passports were surrendered, that originally they tried daily reporting condition, which means I would have to go to the police every day and squiggle on a bit of paper. This is not feasible because of where I live, remote out in the country, not having my own form of motor transport and being dependent on buses, which don't run on Sundays and bank holidays. So they were haggled down to twice a week, passport surrendered. The sticking point was the £5,000 of money that they wanted before I would be released, which my parents were able to cough up with some help from friends and selling their motorhome, which I still feel quite bad about. That was their little hobby. They're getting to that period in their life where they deserve to go on nice trips in motorhomes. Because the money didn't get there in time, if anyone's been following the case of malware tech, this happened to him. He's in prison over the weekend, in jail, in Las Vegas, because the $30,000 wasn't able to be transferred from the UK in the half an hour they gave him to do that. The same for me. I got out of the bail hearing at about 4:00. My parents had a phone call and medicines and things, and eventually they got the memo that I was let out, that I shouldn't be in prison and should be on bail, and I was perfunctorily turfed out eventually with 50p to make a phone call and a bit of paper that was good for the train trip to central London, which is not where I live. I live several hours away from central London in the countryside, and didn't have a phone or any money to do that bit of the journey. So I had the great fun of having to convince a traffic cop to let me use his phone, and then convince the anally retentive railway revenue protection staff to let me on the train, and the ticket would be paid for on the other side. This didn't work, so I had to wait another hour and a half for that money ticket thing to be signed. And eventually made it home. And since then, I have been on extradition bail. So twice a week, I get on the bus to squiggle on a bit of paper, and the lovely country bumpkin police cops ask me why I'm still coming here and haven't they given me a job yet, etc. And quite often I have to go to London for legal meetings and for court appearances. We lost at the district court, which was the main hearing, happened in July of last year. The verdict came in September. We were incredibly surprised to lose for a few reasons. The main one being the United States didn't submit any evidence or call any witnesses or do anything apart from very superficially and cynically cross-examine the 14 witnesses that the defense called, including 3 experts on United States Computer Fraud and Abuse Act law, sentencing guidelines, experts on the conditions in US detention, which Barrett Brown can tell you about at length, or you can read about from his wonderful columns, etc. Experts on my mental health history, which is a lot of clinical depression, anxiety, and Asperger's we discovered during preparation for the case. And they didn't have to do anything. They certainly didn't have to substantiate in any their very hyped up rationale was he wanted to see if aliens existed, and he wanted to see evidence about free energy and other things that the US government might be keeping secret from us. Not sure what he found. That's kind of academic, but it was very clear that this was not a nefarious person trying to enrich themselves at the cost of the US government. It was not a malicious person trying to cause damage to the US government. It was a seeker after truth, which is something that I think we can all sympathize with. And this didn't do him any good in court. He lost all of the hearings, all of the appeals, right the way through the Supreme Court. The case was declined to be taken further by the European Court of Human Rights. So he was waiting to be, as I would put it, kidnapped and extraordinarily rendered, although in this case it would be ordinarily rendered because it was through the legal process, and put in a small box for the rest of his life. There was an intervention because at that time the Home Secretary, our beloved Theresa May, who is now, at least on paper still, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, intervened. She had the discretion to do that at the time, which I believe actually the Home Secretary still has the discretion to do, because it is inherently a political act to surrender a subject who is under your protection, inferior as a citizen, to surrender them to another sovereign power. That's not the government's position. So after Theresa May was effectively had her arm twisted and her heartstrings, let's say, put on a artificial life machine by the power of the public, by strong campaigns from newspapers, a lot of people turning up in the streets, raising some noise, her indefatigable and amazing mother, his mother, Janice Sharp, who not for one single day didn't do everything she could to write to people to solicit the help of pop stars and musicians and anyone else who would be sympathetic. So Theresa May said, no, I am refusing to sign the final stage of this extradition warrant because Gary McKinnon has, amongst other things, had severe Asperger's syndrome, and simply the United States detention system, its ability to accommodate his needs, was so woeful that it was an insurmountable chance that he would attempt to end his own life, and this would be considered a bad thing. So the extradition was blocked to ensure that they were never put in this tricky situation again of upsetting their special relationship bosses, effectively. The laws changed. It introduced this thing called the forum bar, which simply put says if it's in the interest of justice for the prosecution to proceed domestically rather than in the requesting authority, there should be no extradition, which is great. It's never once worked since it's been introduced, and it was a bit of an act of legislative sleight of hand, because at the same time they didn't raise as much fanfare about it, but they transferred the discretion of the Home Secretary to consider the implications for the requested person's human rights of their extradition. That was transferred to the courts. This is obviously a meaningless and newspeak choice of verb, because it's not like the courts didn't have the power to consider human rights. That was incumbent on them throughout. So they didn't give the court any new powers. All they did was tie the hands of the Home Secretary and say there is no discretion to consider human rights, which I think is incredibly troubling legal position for any government, and I intend to hang them by the neck for it, metaphorically speaking, when I get the chance. The reason for this is I have a letter signed by Amber Rudd, our Home Secretary, again in name only, saying, while I accept that there is a significant chance, Mr. Love, that you will die in US custody, I do not have the discretion to consider how your human rights will be violated by my decision to sign this bit of paper. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. she knows bad things will happen. There's a strong chance of a breach of my human rights if I am kidnapped and locked in a box for the rest of my life, or drugged. I'll explain why my passage through the criminal justice system will be even more Kafkaesque than is usual in a bit. But the worrying thing is that she can say, yes, I will implicitly, actually through an overt act, allow your human rights to probably be violated, and I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it because the law ties my hands. I don't think that will actually pass a test if it goes to judicial review, because the human rights, you can't bind your own hands against considering human rights. It's absolutely necessary in any decision made by any public servant that they consider the implications, and if there is a reasonable chance that human rights will be violated as a direct consequence of their decision, then they may not make that decision. That is simple and unavoidable. But anyway, it happened regardless. So we had to ask leave, so doff our caps and say, please, Mr. High Court judges, do you have a few days to hear our case? And does our appeal have any merits? They eventually agreed, and not just that it had enough merit to warrant an appeal, that the case raised issues of great importance. One of the reasons why it might raise issues of great importance is that the charges on the US indictments, again, I should remind you, I was never charged in the UK, so as far as UK law goes, I'm as innocent as they come. Charges in the United States, because of the bizarre sentencing guidelines, it's a kind of game of Kafka multiplier crazy arithmetic, or snakes and ladders. So I am being extradited in parallel to 3 different court districts in the United States, 3 different states. Trying to say this in roughly increasing order of terribleness, the state of New Jersey, which is notoriously corrupt. That was the venue in which they tried and wrongfully convicted Andrew Auernheimer, aka Weave, for using curl and changing a number to embarrass Apple for revealing all of the email addresses of the rich people that bought their iPhones. He was convicted. He did spend 1.5 years in prison, despite not having done the overt act. And that conviction was eventually quashed because none of the alleged harm happened anywhere near New Jersey. They picked that court because they knew they'd have an easy time there. And actually, venue is important under US law. So Orrin Kerr and Tor Eklund, who sort of represents me as well, were able to get that conviction quashed, and Weave was released from prison. Unfortunately, by that time, he had completely lost his mind and is an incredibly avid neo-Nazi now. And while I still have solidarity for him because of his experiences with the US government, obviously, if I met him, I'd probably have to punch him. But that's another story. And so New Jersey is bad. It's corruption, real estate, Donald Trump, mafia land. That's still the worst, least bad of the 3. Then we have the Southern District of New York, which is where they try the terrorists. So if I went before a jury there, which is incredibly unlikely, I'll ever go before a jury in the United States, but they would push up it's a foreign person who attacked our national security. We're just down the road from ground zero, etc., etc., etc. And this is also the jurisdiction where Jeremy Hammond was sentenced to the maximum possible sentence under his non-cooperative plea agreement under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which was 10 years. He's still in prison. His rights are routinely violated. He's routinely subject to punitive, vindictive, disciplinary procedures, solitary confinement, trouble for reading the wrong kinds of literature, for free speech activities, just as happened with Barrett Brown, for organising other prisoners, etc. Generally not having a great time of it. And despite signing a plea agreement, there was no downwards departure from the sentencing maximum by the judge, who was also the judge that let Sabu, the snitch and scumbag who betrayed everyone in Lulsec, to save his own hide, let him go on time served, despite the things that he was getting up to, both before and after his time cooperating with the FBI, being probably of more severity and not goodness than anything Jerry Hammond was accused of. specifically because the United States took the opportunity to have the FBI direct him to orchestrate attacks on foreign governments, which I'm sure they used to great benefit, and get away with it because, it was just this criminal hacker who then was a confidential informant and then got some leeway, and so the whole thing's incredibly dodgy. So Sabu walked, despite being a reprehensible human being, and Jeremy Hammond is languishing in prison, despite being a wonderful human being. So I don't have much optimism about the Southern District of New York, but then the clincher is the Eastern District of Virginia, aka the Rocket Docket, for its amazing efficiency and speed of getting people into small boxes, under the very low chance that I would face a jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. They would all work for or be closely associated with the military-industrial complex. It's the Beltway. So there's not much chance that they would see me as a peer. There wouldn't be a jury of my peers. There would be a jury indirectly of people that would perceive themselves as my indirect alleged victims. But the worrying thing is, instead of consolidating all of these cases into a single district and venue and court, as they have done with much more trifling and trivial matters as the 9/11 terrorist plotters and other people that have actually hurt and killed innocent human beings, they all got one court. They are reserving the right to try me 3 times over. So what this means is, under the incredibly low prospects of me being successfully kidnapped, put in a plane, not dying mysteriously on that plane, I would be arraigned probably in the state of New York. I would absolutely, definitely be refused bail under the reasonable premise that if you have to kidnap someone, then you can assume they're a flight risk. And also because I have no connections in the United States, so no place where I could stay, et cetera, et cetera. So there would be no question of bail. They would keep me in pretrial detention. So all we have then is the matter of which rights do I waive? Everyone waives their right to a speedy trial under the Constitution, because it's kind of, do you want to go into your very complex technical trial with hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of digital evidence tomorrow, or do you want to go for it in 2 years and spend the intervening time in prison where you can't really do much useful because you're kept incommunicado and not able to use technology? So I probably would waive that right to a speedy trial, because almost nobody takes the speedy trial, because it's a bit like representing yourself. Anyone who does that has a fool for a client, and you will go to jail. So they would keep me in pretrial detention. They would reserve the right, which I do believe I'm innocent, and asserted the right to proclaim that I'm innocent and to have the evidence tested in court. We could expect a year for it to go for the first court, for it to drag out for months because of the amount of evidence, or lack of evidence, but certainly the amount of data that they would throw at the court. And I would be kept behind bars the whole time. And even if I was acquitted, let's say they did New Jersey first, they would still take me to court in New York. And even if I was acquitted, they would still take me to court in Virginia. So I could end up spending perhaps 5 years in pretrial detention, and then miraculously be acquitted in all 3 courts. I don't say miraculously because I'm not very innocent. I say miraculously because the government, the Federal Department of Justice prosecutors are very good at winning cases. Not necessarily in court. They're very good at winning cases because 96 to 97% of the federal cases never end up in court. So if you have 20 people in a room, 18 and a half of them just go to jail. They sign a bit of paper saying I should go to jail, and they don't sign it because they believe it. They sign it because they don't take the plea agreement. The charges that can be stacked against them are so absurd, disproportionate, and barbaric that it's better to just not have a trial and to take the couple of years, the 3 years, the 5 years, the 10 years in Jeremy Hammond's case, because if he hadn't taken that agreement and forced them to make the effort to try and prove the case against him, it would have been 30 years, it would have been 40 years. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act gives incredible leeway for prosecutors to add these modifiers, these bonus, these power-ups to the offence. So look into the case of Stephen Watt. There's a fantastic keynote that he gave at a conference about these. He goes into these modifiers and sentencing guidelines, but they can say if you committed the offence with sophistication or using a special skill or with the intent to cause damage to the United States government, or if the inflated or imaginary damage figures are above a certain level, etc. So in any case, Joshua Draytel and Tor Eklund and another expert did some analysis on this with the charges, with the free trials, with the
Lauri,
being treated. Yes.
Can you hear me? This is Kim.
Yes, hi Kim.
Hi, I'd like to weigh in for a second here.
Oh, sure.
You know, what's quite interesting is they are, of course, not interested in giving you a fair trial, because, you know, after I was granted bail, I was so confident in winning my case that my lawyers wrote to the prosecutors in the United States, wrote to the DOJ, and said, I'm on the next plane to the United States as long as some very reasonable conditions are met. I'm now on bail in New Zealand, so I expect bail in the United States. I have been granted by the New Zealand courts that I can use my funds for my legal defense. I would like the same in the United States. And they refused that.
Yeah.
They did not accept that a copyright crime, which of a novel nature, which has never been tried like this in the United States before, would not be sufficient for me to have bail, and that I should have absolutely no funds for my defense. And actually, they went ahead and they seized all my assets, and then they did a civil forfeiture of all my assets by declaring me a fugitive, by saying because I'm legally using my rights to fight extradition to the United States, and which is my treaty right in New Zealand, I'm therefore a fugitive, and I cannot even make any attendance in U.S. court via my lawyers to fight for these basic things. So the U.S. system is not at all designed to give you a fair go. They just want to lock you up. They want to win at any cost. And if it means that they have to steal all your money, that you will be left with a public defender who has 180 other cases at the same time, in the largest copyright case in history, as they call it, they will destroy you, you know? So I can understand why you are fighting against extradition, and you shall never cease that, and you will see the support only increase, Lauri, and there are a lot of people watching you around the world, loving you, standing by you. You should always remember that in your darkest moments, and we all have them sometimes, that we are all here supporting you. Yeah?
Thank you. It means a lot to hear that, and I am lucky that I have a good support base and understanding parents who, by all rights, could have kicked me out of this house by now for inconveniencing them so much. But your point is absolutely correct. The Department of Justice prosecutors are not in the business of winning fair trials. They will do everything in their power to avoid giving a hearing, because it's hard work collecting evidence and proving a case. Why do that when you can bully someone into signing away their rights and doing your job for you? And in my case, that will be very easy, because as I was getting to, the charges amount to 99 years maximum, and they can say, do you want to take the chance of spending the rest of your life in prison and then a further hypothetical 30 or 40 years, or do you want the 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, I really don't know how much they hate, deal that we'll give you? And every lawyer would advise me to take the deal, because it's suicidal not to. So it's a rigged system, and sadly, tragically, the best way to win is not to play at all. And Aaron Swartz's way out of that was tragic, tragically to end his life. I have no intention of doing that unless I'm forced to. And so my intent is that if I'm to be tried for these offences, which is not necessarily a bad idea, it might be good for a court to hear what the reasons might have been behind this campaign, if they are able to actually link me to it with any evidence. and why perhaps electronic civil disobedience is not necessarily criminal. And there are precedents in the UK, I think also maybe in Australia and New Zealand as well, where activists have, for instance, gone onto an Air Force base, a RAF base in the UK, where B-52 bombers were working and planning to operate and bomb people, and they have destructively disabled them, and they have been convicted on strict liability of breaking the letter of the law, but it was not considered criminal because they didn't have a mens rea, they didn't have a criminal intent. It was a defense of necessity that their conscience demanded that to prevent a greater harm, they technically step over this line and engage in civil disobedience. So it's possible to argue this in the UK. In the United States, it would never be possible. And also in the UK, the maximum time that I could spend, I could be given as a custodial sentence for all of the litany of things that I'm accused of being involved in would be 36 months, of which I would serve about 18 months inside. So we don't have great prisons in the UK. I know this because my parents both work in the prison, literally a stone's throw outside of my window. And there's a good chance that unpleasant things would happen to me there. But I've been in there for a few days. I think I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. If it was 18 months, I would be able to come out and contribute meaningfully to society through the security work that I continue to do. The United States, the only purpose that they have for me, and the same for you, Kim, and the same for Barrett and Jeremy Hammond and Chelsea Manning, Leonard Peltier, and various other activists who are in prisons, their purpose is to be an example, to be a reason for other people not to push back against authority, not to undermine the bully in the playground that is the United States domestically and abroad, and not the people, but the actions of the government, and to oppose, as we're talking about, the spying and the crackdown on civil liberties.
Don't you think, though, Lauri, that may have backfired? I mean, Chelsea Manning has inspired millions. Snowden has said very plainly that Manning impacted him greatly and his decision. So while we might be intended to deter people from speaking up, don't you think that perhaps we are also doing the opposite and inspiring them?
Yes, but it depends on people not being cowed. So in the majority of cases, they step on someone and that person isn't really heard from again and not supported sufficiently. They don't have the solidarity that we're lucky to have, and it is effective, which is why they do it. But when people stand tall and are brave and do have support, like Chelsea, like Barrett, like him, like Edward Snowden, like Julian Assange, and they do not give in and they do not allow themselves to be silenced, then yes, it does backfire, because they effectively give a platform to these people. So I can give interviews to national broadsheet newspapers, and I can be asked to go on BBC television and Sky News and the radio to talk about cyber issues. I would never be considered authoritative on any of these subjects had the United States not significantly polished up my resume, so to speak, by making me out to be the one of the world's most dangerous hackers or something absurd like that. So by the oppression, they can give a voice, and by the way people refuse to accept the oppression and the persecution, that gives power to people. And it's only through struggle that we actually find out what our strength is, what the community that we have is, how resourceful we can be, because we face such strong challenges. So I don't even necessarily regret at this stage that I'm in this situation, because I'm very much hoping that the precedent that will be set when we win our case, we have a High Court appeal hearing at the end of November, 28th and 29th of November, at the Royal Courts of Justice in the UK, before the Lord's Chief Justice and some lackey judge. I'm hoping that a precedent will be set that never again can the United States seek to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction for alleged non-violent offences. So to put that in simpler terms, if you haven't been to the United States and you didn't hurt anyone and you might have committed a non-violent crime in another country, then the United States will have to cooperate with that country to prosecute you under the laws that you implicitly agree to abide by. And at no point whatsoever did Kim Dotcom sign up to the copyright law of the United States. And at no point did I sign up to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. In fact, I am a vocal opponent of it for years before I was indicted under it, and it needs to cease to exist. So only America gets to play this game. Only America gets to write some laws and then extend the coverage of those laws to the entire world. And they can only do this because they have power and they're a bully. So they can step in and take over the UK legal process, and the UK seems to be okay with this. At no point have I had a clear answer from the National Crime Agency why, when they were so confident to steal all of my computers and et cetera, and had so much cooperation from the United States, that they couldn't get a charge brought when I've been charged with things that I wasn't even in the same place before for political activities. It's very easy to charge someone under UK law. The reason it didn't happen, I have reasonable evidence for it, is the United States obstructed the UK criminal justice process and prevented the Crown Prosecution Service from having a reasonable prospect of a fightable case. So they quite rightfully said, well, we're not going to spend taxpayers' money prosecuting someone if we're not going to get the help we need to achieve it. But sadly, this allowed, again, without any involvement from me or my legal representatives, this allowed me to go from facing a reasonably fair trial where I could argue a case and possibly a year and a half in prison or a suspended sentence, to my life being ruined and probably ended for stupid reasons. And this switch from a relatively humane, functional criminal justice system to the worst criminal justice system outside of the developing world, and significantly better than most parts of the developing, worse than most parts of the developing world, and to 99 years of potential time in prison, just because they wanted to, just because they were like, no, this isn't working, we're not getting the results we want from the UK cops, we'll take this one. And that seems to be okay. So if we win in court, they will be less inclined to do that. And I know for a fact that there are young people with great skill and talent who are not of a criminal disposition that sit after me in the queue, so to speak, waiting to be yoinked. The crackers with attitude, young people who embarrass the director, the deputy director of the FBI, director of the CIA, who were using stupid personal email accounts that were easily phished or social engineered. They're in line. And the reason that our friend and colleague Marcus Hutchins, Malware Tech blog, who saved the day, helped save the day when the WannaCry ransomware worm was had a devastating onslaught on our hospitals, our national healthcare system, and registered the sinkhole domain, that kill switch that stopped the worm from spreading, notably rightly lauded as a hero for that. The reason why they didn't cooperate with the police to have him arrested here for the stupid things they accused him of doing was because the extradition process is already too inconvenient for them. So they waited till he was in Las Vegas and picked him up there. And as I said earlier, he's in jail for the weekend and a $30,000 bail, and he's going to have to go to Wisconsin, which they haven't explained the reason for that venue, and it's probably because they have a corrupt judge or something. So we need to kind of stop this. We need the United States to understand where its borders are and where its jurisdiction is and where its power to enforce its laws ends, which is at those borders, and for it to act in good faith and cooperate under the existing mutual legal assistance treaties with other jurisdictions to have people convicted there if necessary. And in many cases, the United States idea of a necessary prosecution does not accord with what the people here would think is necessary. So we need to put them back in the box. And with all the various other things that are happening with the United States constitutional and political crises at the moment, there's a good chance that the result of our cases and our struggles will be a slightly less crazy system of international abuse and violations of justice. So that's what we hope, at least.
Awesome. Lauri, I want to ask you a question. I actually want to ask everybody on the panel this question, but we'll start with you. What can people do to help you? What are the best ways for them to help you? Okay,
so I'll start with the one that I like the least, because I'm not a big fan of money, but people can contribute if they have money to the Courage Foundation, who is helping with some of the costs and campaigning. So there's a website free, Lauri.com, Lauri. but screw money. Like, there are much better ways that you can help. So that's through raising the awareness of the case. So almost nobody I've met in person, with the exception of a few internet trolls, nobody who understands the case thinks that I should be taken to America and potentially locked up for 99 years for allegedly being involved in an active political process after they ruined somebody else's life for similar reasons and then caused it to end. Nobody thinks that once they understand it. So the more people that understand it, the greater chance, in theory, that it will be seen by the High Court as being absurd. So raising awareness, sharing links and stories, and then writing to politicians. So we actually had a very successful letter writing campaign to the MPs here, which I still don't understand quite how it happens. Courage Foundation, Naomi Colvin, who's amazing, helped sort of work the magic. But in an act that's slightly out of character, 114 members of parliament, so political representatives in the UK, signed a letter to President Obama at the end of last year, saying to the effect, wouldn't it be very nice if you would cede your jurisdiction so that this case can be prosecuted in the UK, because we have a lot of concerns about this person's sort of rights being violated and them potentially coming to an unpleasant end. That's quite momentous in terms of getting political support for a case. I don't think there's a precedent for that many MPs getting on board. Sadly, we didn't hear anything back from Obama. I think he had a lot on his plate at the time, preparing the transition for President Trump. So we're waiting to see if there needs to be further action taken. Unfortunately, we have our own political and constitutional crisis in the UK at the moment. So I haven't had much follow-up from the MPs. At some point, we'll have a debate in Parliament or in another one of the chambers, and eventually the extradition treaty will have to be revisited so that the United States does have to at least show some evidence, or maybe they only request people who are accused of actually hurting people in a real, tangible sense, or maybe they don't extradite. So at the moment, you can't extradite if the offence isn't a crime in the UK. So if the US says if you don't tip your hat to a horse on a Sunday, then you go to prison for 6 months. That's not a crime here, so you can't be extradited for it. I can be extradited because we have the Computer Misuse Act, which is roughly equivalent and just as silly in many ways as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The way the law needs to be changed is, yes, they're parallel offending, parallel kind of accusations, but the sentencing is not at all commensurate. So if the maximum sentence in the UK is 36 months and the possible sentence in the United States extends up to 99 years, then they shouldn't be considered equivalent, and there should be no question of extradition. So this is a very simple change that can be made and will be made in the course of time. Mm-hmm.
In my case, it's 88 years.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy.
In New Zealand, and that's the irony, it would only be a civil case, no jail time. And they raided me and arrested me and locked me up for a month, and I'm on bail for over 5 years. And just like you, I'm reporting to police twice a week. Mm-hmm. And I've done so for 5.5 years for a civil copyright.
Yeah, it's
to do. They're going to put an end to this expansion of U.S. jurisdiction, the dream of the U.S. empire that they can just arrest anyone around the world and bring them before their courts and have their laws applied to us. Look, we're not living in that crazy system where lobbyists can pay for new laws and create new crimes for which you go to jail for 100 years. We don't have that, neither in Europe or over here in New Zealand, and we should definitely depart from cooperating in any of this nonsense.
And also, it's really important to tie a few of these things up. So the reason why we need to stop the United States from being such a bully and for deciding that it runs things is not just for people like me not wanting to spend their lives in small boxes for stupid reasons, but it's also because the main thing they want to control is the internet. And we know from Edward Snowden that the Five Eyes spying mafia cartel have effectively militarily occupied the internet. So something that we all thought was like the sea, a common good that everyone can use and was under civilian control and was a nice shiny Amazon things, without us really noticing it because they can do it so subtly, that has been occupied, East Germany occupied Afghanistan occupied Iraq. There is a military presence on every bit that matters, on every core router, on every end terminus of every cable carrying all the information. Every internet service provider that handles enough traffic, gets invited to volunteer to have a special box or to have some arrangement so that they can undermine the trust of all of their customers. So, and it's the same with copyright. Aaron Swartz, the reason they stepped on him and tried to make an example of him was because he opposed these terrible legislations that, like you say, were bought and paid for by Hollywood to criminalize non-criminal civil copyright intellectual property issues, to put people in jail, grandmas for sharing music and stuff, just to protect their outdated revenue model, which they need to evolve or die. And their alternative to evolving or dying is to try and fix the game. And because money has power in the United States, they are risking ruining the internet further. And the internet is the single most promising thing, technological artifact that the human civilization has ever created. It gives us the power to become a better superorganism, to overcome divisions of nationality, of geography, of race, ethnicity, of religion, of gender, of sexual preference, etc. To get past the foibles that we had as monkeys, apes, that are not too far away from that kind of mindset, to cooperating and cohesively exploring science and technology and culture and the universe together, which would be great. So many people feel this way, that we're at a fork in the road, that either the internet continues to be this boon for understanding, for connection, for community, for culture, for science, for all the nice things, the humane values, or it becomes a mechanism of totalitarian dystopian control. And at the moment, we are further down that path in the fork in the road. And at a certain point, we won't be able to cross the river between them anymore. So our actions at this bottleneck of civilization, and in the trajectory of human civilization, this bottleneck where the slightest change in an action, the slightest difference in an attitude, in the strength of determination, can make an amazing difference in how we come out at the other end, and how our children and grandchildren look back on us as the people that brought about the age of the internet and the revolutionary changes it brings to human society. Will they look back on us and think, why were they so stupid? As people look back on the ones that allowed the rise of fascism, or will they look back and thank us and think that we acted with nobility and honor and foresight and vision, as people think of the founding fathers of America, etc. So we have a huge responsibility to act in that way, that we are here, we are midwives of the birth of a new world, and the way we approach it, the values that we weave into the tapestry of that new system of being human, matter more than anything anyone could have done in a generation before us, and possibly anything anyone could do in the generation after us. And I think that's why so many people of our generation, between the ages of the panelists here, find themselves in these positions. Why Barrett Brown, Jeremy Hammond, Edward Snowden, and myself find ourselves in these positions because we remember when the internet didn't happen, and we were there and saw it happen and saw this revolutionary potential unfold, and then we saw it go away again, and capitalism and control take back that genie and put a lot of it back in the box. And they're not trying to just put the genie back in the box, but to put shackles on the genie and make the genie do nefarious things at their bidding without us knowing. So it's super important what we're doing now, and tying all these threads together and taking the step of actually having an internet party is amazing, because the internet matters more than coal. It matters more than trade in a traditional sense. It matters more than most domestic policy matters. It certainly matters more than your squabble in the backyard over control of some territory. How we do this internet thing is our legacy to history, to posterity. So I just want to applaud you guys for taking the steps of actually formalizing that priority, and to allowing other people to see how we can use the fantastic developments in culture and technology and ability to organize and share information and to orchestrate collective action, and to show how that can change the political process. And my God, does the political process ever need to be changed, around the world? So I think we're on the right path at the moment.
Beautiful listening to you. Absolutely amazing. And if you want to engage, I don't know if we do have an internet party in the UK yet, but you gotta be in this game. You gotta become active in politics, because everything you just said, from the heart to the heart. This is powerful stuff. This is exactly what we all need to fight for, because they are undermining our rights, our freedoms. They want to cut it all down, gain more control, take over our internet, censor what we can do. And, we need to organize. We need to be smart about it. And geniuses like you and Barrett and Julian, we all need to come together and join forces and show them the limitations, because the internet is a very powerful tool that we should use, and get people involved and get people motivated. The more people understand about these issues, the better it is, the bigger our force against these actions becomes. And you sound like someone who has such a deep understanding of these issues. It would be fantastic if you get involved politically and use your fight and your struggle to get more awareness around these issues. And, we need to keep talking. We need to get everyone to understand what's going on here and how it is affecting the rights of everyone around the world, not just in the UK or New Zealand or in the United States. This is a global thing, and the US is driving this, and we need to shut that aggressive action down.
And it's important that people understand that this is not a narrow issue that we have the privilege of considering because we're in the developed world, we're relatively economically secure, etc. It also matters for the people that haven't, that they're in the developing world, or the exploited world, as I think is a more accurate term, because let's take the example of intellectual property. So the developed world, the West, has vast amounts of material wealth, and places in Africa don't. And there's charity, but charity doesn't really help very much. At least with science, we could have even that out a bit, because it doesn't cost anything for scientists in the developing world, to be able to access scientific journals. It's just the cost of having things on the internet. And yet still we're having to fight for open access. And, I remember bringing this up I used to be a molecular biologist for a bit in Finland, and then we had a conference, and they were talking about how can genetics, how can molecular biology help the developing world. And I said, well, the very first thing you should do is get rid of the intellectual property on the science that you do, so that the things that you can actually freely give to other people without losing the amount that you have yourself can be shared. And simple things like that would help actually harmonize the state of security and comfort and opportunity in the world. And it is that lack of harmony that is creating things like the migrant crisis, which is turning people quite reactionary and xenophobic and inhumane, because these are the natural instincts. When you perceive a lot of people coming to get the nice things that you have and they don't. The internet should be the most effective tool for ensuring that we all have nice things, that the cumulative weight of science, of culture, can be made free to everyone, and that should be a great thing. We just need to get past, again, these outdated ideas that intellectual property is real, and that you have an endless right to revenue for some work that you did once. And so that's just one example, but also the opportunity that the internet and technology gives to countries to actually develop and build their economies, and to improve the rights of their people, is revolutionary. And a lot of that is being squandered, because instead of using it for good purposes, it is again used for control. So the GSM technology, the cell phone technology, that is now helping amazingly places in the developing world to have access to medical information. Wikipedia is trying to get knowledge to everyone. That's great, but the infrastructure they're using was designed by spies for spying purposes. So they're relying on these cell phone towers that can be controlled by NSA, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, whoever's got an interest in the area, to cause trouble. So we need to get rid of this double-edged sword of the technology and have technologies that are for the benefit of the people and not for the benefit of control of already powerful people that don't have your interests at heart. So we're not only fighting this on a political and legal level, we also have to do the technological fight against centralization, against the accrual of power, against the 3 or 4 or 5 social media network corporations who now basically decide the kind of conversations we have, what we get to see and read and hear about to have conversations, who we have the conversations with, and none of this is transparent. I don't know why you turned up in my feed today and this other person who found evidence of a serious crime doesn't turn up in anyone's feeds. That's completely opaque, and it's because we don't understand the algorithms that at the moment determine our life to the point of eugenics, to the point where whoever sits and writes an algorithm at OkCupid decides which pairs of people get to breed at a significant percentage in the population. This is scary as fuck, pardon my language. So we need to put the technology back in the hands of people, open source. And you've done this. You've done amazing stuff with this, with Mega, which is, allowing people to share their information using cryptography. Cryptography is the best tool that we have ever since the printing press, since literacy, since pamphlets and writing. Caused an amazing political awakening and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Well, cryptography is doing that again in ways that it allows us to take the power back. They, despite their best efforts with these repressive legislations, like in the UK, we have the Investigatory Powers Bill, which in theory means that they can call up Facebook and say, well, you've put some end-to-end encryption or something that looks like it in your messaging feature on WhatsApp, but we need to be able to see anything whenever we want. So please break it, but don't tell your customers. Don't tell them that you've undermined fundamentally their trust. We'll just occasionally tap you on the back and break your systems. That doesn't actually work. You can't build a insecure crypto system that's only insecure for the right people. They're either secure or not. And the maths, as Edward Snowden says, is on our side. The routines, the primitives to securely encrypt things, we don't need Facebook for that. We don't need Twitter for that. We don't need anyone at Google for that. They are burnt into the silicon chips to the extent that we can trust them, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But people can write software so that we can have strong, infeasible to break end-to-end encrypted communications everywhere. And we should be making that the default, because when they lose their ability to run these huge dragnets to just suck up and hoover, as we were hearing before, every bit of conversation, every bit of unencrypted traffic, every text message, every email that's not end-to-end encrypted, and to just chuck them in a huge, massive, electricity, water-hungry data center in the desert inexplicably that keeps going on fire inexplicably. When they can't do that anymore, they'll have to go back to their actual job, which is intelligence, targeted intelligence on bad people. And the misprioritization of this, got to grab it all, got to collect it all, worry about it later, has resulted in deaths in the UK. We had three or four terrorist incidents this year, and in almost all of those cases, the suspect was known to security services. And I don't want to get too cynical or conspiratorial about maybe they were happy for these things to happen. They had been warned, and these people were subjects of targeted surveillance. And instead of monitoring them closely enough with the resources that they might have had, if they weren't busy, getting all our sexting on file for them to perversely look at, they could have stopped these things. So actually,
Lauri,
sorry.
I have some good news around the topic of encryption, and that is that there is going to be an independent body based in Iceland, which is going to become a third-party encryption provider to a large number of new websites that are providing communication tools, file sharing tools, including what I'm working on now, Bitcash and K.im. And that will be completely outside the reach of the Five Eyes countries. And it will strengthen Iceland as a jurisdiction that provides security and privacy for its citizens, but also for the global community. And as long as we have one jurisdiction in the world where such a third-party encryption provider can exist, none of these local laws can be used to try and create backdoors and try and send a letter to a company that then has to by law build in a backdoor that the users will never know about. All of that will be eliminated by the efforts that some independent groups are currently working on. So that's a beautiful development, and you are absolutely right. Encryption is the way to go, and doing it right means they cannot spy on us, and that will only continue to be utilized, and will make sure that at some stage, and I've said that many years ago, at least half of the internet will be fully encrypted, and we're just going to blind all these people that think they can snoop in on all of our private communications.
And it's good. I mean, the lesson we learned from the first crypto wars, or the first round of the crypto wars, because they never really ended. We just sort of lost our attention and let them steal a march on us. The lesson we learned is it's inherently fragile. When they tried to stop the author of PGP from exporting that technology, which allows people to encrypt things securely and message each other, they got away with it for a long time, and then they couldn't, because thanks to the First Amendment, he wrote the code in a book, and they didn't feel confident enough to ban a book in America. So and then the genie was out of the bottle, and everyone was able to use this. And we thought that we'd won and sat on our hands for a bit, and what they did in the meantime was subtly undermine all of the software and do various other nefarious things. So they kind of did. We did have a sort of win, but we didn't check the small print, and they changed it a lot of times to the point that we're now losing again. But like you say, it just takes one. It just takes one exception that cannot be pressured or leveraged or bullied. And Iceland is in the best position to be that. And they've already stood up, they're the only place that's actually jailed its bankers, for causing the financial crash. How has nobody else picked up this fantastic example, in the UK?
And how has the NSA not used their spy cloud to have all this evidence against the bankers that were committing crimes against all of us en masse, making billions of dollars? None of them went to jail, but they have all the evidence to lock them up.
Yeah. It's funny. Brahara, who was my prosecutor before he was sacked by Donald Trump, he's become a bit of one of these figures in the resistance, whatever. It's all a bit silly. But he's kind of hagiographied and lionized now for standing up to Donald Trump. He didn't stand up to any of these bankers. He was the prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, where Wall Street is. Not a single one of the people that caused the financial global economic crisis, which has allowed, amongst many other places, our government in the UK to exercise crippling austerity for 7 years, to the point where millions and millions queue for food banks in the fourth or fifth most wealthy country in the world, where people like myself with disabilities and mental health difficulties are attempted to be starved to death for begging for the paltry £70 a week they were giving me in disability benefits, because I'm economic undesirable. And it wasn't to save any money. They haven't saved any money with these punitive cruelty towards benefit claimants. It's just an ideology so that they can scapegoat some people, so they can justify destroying the state, taking away public services. And they're only able to do this because there was an economic crash, and the poor bore the burden of that and continue to bear the burden of that, whereas the people who are responsible for it were bailed out, continue to be bailed out, still award themselves ridiculous bonuses, and I don't really do anything particularly useful. So I'm happy that, amongst other things, you're working in cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies allow us to get rid of these parasites in finance, in central banking, and actually leverage technology.
I mean, it's already underway. We're going to destroy all these banks. We're going to crack this whole elite establishment system apart, and they don't even see it coming, and it's already happening. So what I'm doing with Bitcash, what other people are doing in the space is amazing. The blockchain is changing the game like nothing else. It's basically like the internet. I was excited in the 90s about the internet, and nothing excites me more than blockchain now. I mean, it's just beautiful. So yeah, we're going to beat them. It's just no way. I mean, they're going to hit out and launch out and try and stop all these things. But like you said, it's math. They can't beat math.
Yeah, and it is also a sign of their weakness that they resort to, trying to ruin your life and kidnap you and turn a civil matter, if there was any civil matter to begin with, into a criminal thing. And again, to make an example of me, to silence me and put me in a small box for the rest of my life. Partially they're doing that because they're vindictive, unpleasant people, but the main reason is because they're afraid and they're weak. And so they know that they can't win the technological battle unless they subvert the people that run the technology. They can't win the argument on the merits for undermining the internet, because people rightly acknowledge that it is better as a public good. It is better not in the control of one party. It's better that it isn't balkanized and nationalized, that it's a shared resource that's not under military occupation. That's quite an easy argument to win with people who are not vested in that control. So they resort to silencing and oppressing the people that are fighting for those freedoms. And that should always be an indication that you're doing the right thing. When they're trying to strongly inconvenience your life and your friends and your colleagues and comrades' lives, what you're doing, you're probably doing the right thing. So you should keep it up, and
people will look
support each other.
In a few decades. People
The
story of Edward Snowden, and the story of Julian Assange, and the little contributions that you and I and Barrett and other people like us are making to this history, which is currently written. They will look back at this and they will understand how important this time was, how important it was that the truth came out about these systems, how important it is that a group of people formed and it grew stronger and bigger, and the effort to stop these things grew stronger and bigger. And in the end, I believe we're going to win. We're going to turn this thing around. They will not get away with this. And, I'm proud to be part of this movement. And we just all need to keep going. As much pressure as they put on us, it should encourage us to speak even louder, to fight even harder, because in the end, they can't prevail with this complete destruction of our human rights.
Exactly. I mean, the phrase that I always tell people is the most important thing you can do is to speak truth to power, because power cannot continue to exert itself in places where it is oppressive in the presence of truth. It's only through ignorance. The only reason the NSA, the GCHQ, the Five Eyes were able to get away with subverting the internet, to sucking up all of our communications, was because people didn't know. And had people known at the time, then they would have pushed back and it would have been harder to achieve. And sadly, since Edward Snowden, they've ratcheted in a lot of these things because they'd done so much that there wasn't enough outrage to actually push it back far enough. And so perversely, they've been able to solidify a lot of the things that they've taken away and the things that they've subverted in the UK. And so we have to keep pushing back because it's progressively harder to undo these things in the legal framework. What they think they can get away with. We can win the battle technologically. So in many ways, it's better to actually produce better technology than to waste too much energy reforming through the legal systems, at least in places where the political system and legal system is broken, which is sadly the USA and the UK, which are the two of the main offenders. In other places like New Zealand, you are making some progress. The courts are still somewhat independent, and they will recognise that the law has been broken with the illegal spying.
It's going quickly, my friend. Even in New Zealand, I mean, at the outset, I was quite hopeful that there is an independent judiciary here. But when you see the gamemanship and the chess moves that the Attorney General over here does to remove judges that are critical about my case from my cases, the Attorney General has so far removed 3 judges that have ruled in my favor and has promoted people that have ruled against me. And it's really quite interesting to see, how the justice system is not really doing justice in the light of what's obviously corrupt and wrong. Most of the New Zealand population understand that the case against me is a sham. That is what the opinion of most New Zealanders is. Yet the courts still feel, a certain, I would say, patriotism, where they say, well, let the US deal with this. Just ship him away. If he has a strong case, well, bring it in the US, deal with it there. We don't want to be seen as this country that has made this mistake. It's better for us to extradite him and let him deal with it in the United States. But what these judges don't understand is that the price for that logic is that the moment I arrive in the United States, I will be locked up for many years. I will be separated from my family. I have 5 young children. I will not see them for a very long time. I will be defenseless because all my assets have been forfeited in a completely unlawful, ridiculous way that would never even be possible in New Zealand. You cannot declare someone a fugitive and steal all their assets without a single hearing, without ever having heard the merits of the case. So, the problem that I'm facing is the judiciary over here is becoming more and more compliant with what is required politically to give to the US empire and what the political powers in New Zealand desire to give and be rewarded by being part of the Five Eyes, by getting economic benefits. And, they are happily trading away the rights of New Zealanders as a cost for that. And let me give you one example. Just recently, through court proceedings, it came out that the NSA was involved directly in the spying on me in New Zealand. And the GCSB had to admit in court that prior affidavits that they had filed of the ending date of the surveillance, where they said this all ended basically a month after the raid, after the investigation started. On the day of the raid, they said they terminated the spying. And now it came out that it went on for another 2 months. And so that the GCSB, the spy agency here, cannot be charged with perjury for lying in these affidavits. They are now claiming that a third party has used their GCSB systems to continue the interception of my communications without their knowledge. And the only third party that would be capable of doing that is the NSA, and the only third party that would have any interest in that data anyway is the United States, because they were the ones that brought the case against me. And here's the disgusting part about this. The New Zealand government passed much more intrusive laws for the GCSB, making the prior illegal conduct legal by just one vote in Parliament. Now imagine if New Zealanders would have known at the time that the NSA can use the GCSB sensors directly to spy on New Zealanders without the knowledge of the GCSB. Do you think that law would have passed? So just by lying, by covering things up, by claiming national security considerations, when they keep these things secret, they are completely betraying the citizenry of New Zealand and lying to the people here. And my fight is about all of that coming out and becoming clear. And what we're working on here today and in the coming few months is to establish new legislation that is going to prohibit this kind of conduct. How could the New Zealand government give the NSA a key to the communications of all New Zealanders and then allowing the NSA to spy on New Zealanders without the knowledge of the GCSB? That is a question of independence. sovereignty, and that will be answered over here in New Zealand in the next few years that I will be fighting my legal battles. But that is what's going on. Just with lying, with keeping us in the dark, with redacting, with not giving us discovery, with not giving us our legal information that we are entitled to, they are able to expand their powers and their lies. And, ultimately it will all come crushing down, because this house of cards that they have built, the insiders know that Five Eyes is really only set up to allow the US, through the other four partners, to subvert the US law to spy on their own citizens. The same for New Zealand. If the New Zealand government wants to look into a New Zealander, all they have to do is type in the email address or phone number of a New Zealander into the NSA spy cloud, and there it is, the entire surveillance product available about that person. That is subverting and hacking the laws that were nationally created to protect the citizens from that very conduct of these spy agencies. So, my case is probably the only one in the world right now where we can go through the court process and uncover exactly what they have done. And by showcasing it, in my case, people will understand that this applies internationally, and how important it is that we wind these powers back and expose the crimes that have been done. And if we ever get to that point, a lot of people will go to jail, and it will not be you or me.
Yeah, and it's necessary. It raises some really important points. I've used the word sovereignty a lot, but the Five Eyes system, these intelligence agencies are not beholden to the state that they work for. They're certainly not beholden to the citizens that they claim to be work for, whose taxpayer money they use. The Five Eyes system acts in a way autonomously as an international mafia, as an international cartel and a racket. And like you say, if governments refuse to cooperate, if the courts refuse to defer, to allow them to get away with lying, to not retroactively legalize. We've had this in the UK when GCHQ has actually been found by the court very rarely to have broken the law. All they do is they say the reason why they were breaking the law is because they didn't have a good enough policy, but they've written a policy now, so actually it's legal, and we're not going to give any consequences for the fact that it was illegal for all this time. So that's the usual way these things go when we win, even. But it works like a racket in that nobody. This national church of national security, the false idol of national security, means that governments can use it as an excuse when rights are being violated. So we have the case of terrible things happen in Saudi Arabia all the time. They're a reprehensible, barbaric government. They execute political protesters, non-violent political protesters. One in particular reached a threshold of public awareness that David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, was questioned about it. Why doesn't the Foreign Commonwealth Office say, can you please not crucify? Literally, they were going to crucify this kid who was under 18 at the time that he was accused of being involved in these protests. David Cameron, in a moment of frankness, in a moment of candor, said, if we kick up too much of a fuss against Saudi Arabia, they will withhold intelligence from us, and that means there's more chance of a terrorist incident occurring. And I can tell you, because I don't care about getting sued, that's not exactly what they mean. What Saudi Arabia means is, we will make sure some terrorism happens in your country if you don't cooperate. It's not that they will not share the information. They control the terrorists around the world indirectly through the system of Wahhabism. But they can certainly make it very likely that you will have a bombing or a stabbing or people driving into people on a bridge or whatever stupid things they do. And so it's a cartel, it's a racket, and it means that we don't have rights. Or this notion that the nation state is the defender of the rights of its subjects and citizens. There might have been some merit to it at some point, but with regards to these spy agencies, it's completely meaningless. We are product, we are farms for intelligence, and this is sold and traded on a kind of black market to get access to other information, or to get political favors, or to project power and influence. in some backwater or developing parts of the world. So it's not just subverting our rights, it's subverting democracy around the world. It is ossifying and calcifying these power relations, this colonialism, this imperialism that is that leads to the corruption and the violence in other parts of the world. So I can walk down the street and not worry about being shot or stabbed or something here in the UK. But part of the reason why I have that privilege and luxury is because we export disorder and we export instability to other parts of the world, and we're quite happy to benefit from that, to maintain our position as the privileged, as the top dogs, as the ones who get the benefits of the trade, as the ones who don't have to pay for the grain, for the oil at a fair price, etc. So when we fix these things, when we stop the spy agencies from acting without any accountability, without not fettered by any laws or moral decency, to allow this imperialism and this subversion of democracy and rights around the world, I think we'll see a great change in the speed at which societies develop, because we have this fundamentally racist idea that the reason there is corruption in Africa or parts of Asia is because they're less civilized, because they needed the colonialists to show them how democracy works. It's not the case. It's because a lot of money is made from maintaining that corruption, and
there's the very problem, isn't it? Because business needs to grow, more money needs to be made, more profits need to be made. So this apparatus of spying and the private intelligence companies are growing. They are incentivized to do more, to create more scenarios where they can, spy on us. And it's just like the private U.S. prison system. It's a business. It needs to grow. More people need to be locked up to make more profit. That is really what drives this whole thing. It's money and power.
Wow, just wow.
Guys, that was unbelievably incredible. I'll let you talk and talk, because every single thing that is being said is completely spot on. Particularly what Lauri was saying about the military threat to the internet. And when we talk about a military threat, the military are the true rulers of the Western world, and the military are not unique to their one nationality. And this is what is proven by what Kim is explaining about the NSA using the GCSB spy tools. The GCSB has more loyalty to the NSA, I believe, than they have to New Zealand. And I completely agree that the political system and even the legislature in New Zealand are unable to rein in or control the military. So the military of the Five Eyes has become the supreme entity of all 5 countries. And the political system exists only to convince people that they do have a democracy and they do still have sovereignty. But New Zealand exists, as I once wrote, only in our memories and in its name. Unfortunately, New Zealand is as much America right now as America is. And I believe it's the same for all of the Five Eyes. And that is, when we're talking about sovereignty, we are fighting to regain our own countries and control and say over our own countries. Because at present, if a government came into power in New Zealand that tried to extricate ourselves from that, the military would flex their muscle and they would get rid of that government by whatever means necessary so that they could reassert their power and their control. So that's how huge this fight is. This fight is not just about votes or an election, unfortunately. It is not even just about educating people, because we did that with the GCSB movement in 2013. 90% of New Zealand stood against that bill. We had 25 towns and cities marching. We had the #1 political TV show in the country talking about the issues every single day, and we still couldn't effect change. And the reason for that is because the political system is not serving us, even when our entire country doesn't agree with what they're doing. So I think the other key points too that I took away from that was where Lauri was talking about the homogenization of technology. We have billions of people using 2 mobile systems. Do you ever stop and think to yourself why there is only 2 major mobile operating systems being used by the entire planet? Our tech luminaries, the people who develop alternatives, are either bought for cash or they're crushed. And they are targeted and they are crushed, and that is to prevent competition. And we saw that with the infiltration of Mega. We've seen that with many examples. The military, or the Five Eyes, do not like Aaron Schwartzes of this world. They do not like unknown quantities. They do not like competition. They do not like innovation. And so they target people who are innovators, specifically to maintain their own status quo. Now, we've run way over time with all the talking to date, but I'll tell you what, I've seen everything that there is in the public realm to see about Kim, about Lauri, about Barrett, and what I've never, ever, ever seen is them getting to interact with each other and just talk about issues in free form. So what we have just experienced is a total first. It is a total first, and it's really, really special.
This is great. You're absolutely right. And we need to get Ed in here. We need to get Julian in here. We need to make this a common thing where we talk about recent developments. I'm so happy to meet Barrett for the first time, to see Lauri for the first time. This is a great start. And we need to increase the circle, invite more people to join this discussion. I think this is very powerful, and thank you so much for making that happen, Suzie.
You're so welcome. So we've just been discussing together that we've decided we're going to make this fortnightly for the next 2 months. So every 2 weeks, we're going to have a round table, and we're going to invite
get up to speed.
Just named and all of our other compatriots who are involved in this struggle. And we're going to progressively together discuss these issues and then work on the bill. So what I'd like to do now is quickly find out from you, Kim, what people can do to help you.
I don't need any money. I'm good at making money. So I will always find a way to fight my cases. I have a really good legal team, and my new team has committed to continue the fight, even if I have periods of financial issues. They know me by now. They know that I'm a good entrepreneur. I'm a good innovator, and my money is in my head and not in my bank account. So if I want to make money down the road in the future, they trust in my ability to do so. The most important thing that I can ask for is for people just to become knowledgeable about our cases, about what they've done to Julian Assange, what they've done to Barrett Brown, what they're doing to Lauri, what they're doing to me, how they have vilified Edward Snowden, who is really the biggest hero of our time. Be knowledgeable about it, because the more you know about it, the more disgusted you get with the people in power. And that is the only way how we're going to change things. The more people know about it, the more likely it becomes that we will crack their skulls for what they've done, and that we will find a political movement here that will expand and grow through word of mouth, through more people becoming knowledgeable, following us on Twitter, retweeting our stuff, telling their friends about it, sharing the message, because we are in a war here for our freedoms, for our right. This is not just some lousy little backstreet fight. This is about the future of the world. Are we going to live in a society that is completely monitored, 100% surveilled, and where anything you say can be used against us, and therefore you will not speak your mind anymore? Is that the world that we want, or do we want to have a world where we can think freely, speak freely, express our opinions, and not be dictated by the state what we can say or think? That is a battle worth engaging in. And I ask everyone who is listening tonight, to tell your friends, tell your family. Do whatever you can with your own mouth, with your words, and get people interested in this. And then we can grow and create a movement, and that is going to shut them down. Because once people understand what's going on, it's game over for them.
Thank you, Kim. Barrett, what can people do to help you in your situation?
Right now, the pursuance system, I'll be working on this for the foreseeable future. Again, you can go to pursuanceproject.org and learn more about it. We need people to help disseminate this to make sure we have a large pool of applicants to choose from. We want to, obviously have citizen researchers, journalists, people who work in government, NGOs, activists, anyone who has knowledge and some time that they can dedicate to building up real formidable alliances to do the work that needs to be done on a comprehensive basis. We do need donations right now for our program director, Steve Phillips out of San Francisco. He's the one person we're paying right now. I'm paying him at this time out of my proceeds from my book. Later on, we're applying to foundations to get grants so that we can maintain this over the short term. I don't doubt that we'll be able to get income coming in regularly later on. We've got a couple different avenues for that. But if people want to donate by Bitcoin, or if they want to donate other ways, they can contact myself or Steve, and I'll get them in touch with him. You can also apply there to participate, to be considered for participation. You can disseminate this website around so that we get more. That's the most important thing, is that we want to have hundreds and we have about 350 people who have applied so far, just since we kind of quietly released the website a few weeks ago. Obviously, since we have broadcasts coming up, to be discussed on NPR and PBS and Vice, and documentary coming up later this year, and my book next year. So we'll have plenty of opportunities to bring in people, but we want to go ahead and get started now, so that when by that time comes next year, we'll already have as viable ecosystem going on as possible with lots of experimentation, lots of viable pursuances already created, doing these things on a more refined basis. And so we can never have enough of that. We can never have enough dissemination of these ideas and of this particular project. Beyond that, it's important for everyone who wants to be active in this, to clean their own garden, to ensure that they are thinking honestly about issues, regardless of what the implications may be. It's important for everyone to ensure that they are as up on events as possible, that they've considered all the points of view are out there, and made the proper determinations based on where the facts lead. There's definitely fractures within this movement right now over several things that have happened in the last few years, and there's also, of course, ideological divisions that we see. In Anonymous, you had people who were socialists, people who were anarchist libertarians, but they did have a great degree of agreement on some of these ad hoc issues: the police state, the surveillance state, the drug war. There's a great deal that can be accomplished to the extent that everyone who at least is an evidence-based thinker and who respects the rights of others finds those areas of collaboration and agrees to disagree on other issues. And that's what I'm interested in seeing is we not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, as happens in ideological politics quite a bit. So the Pursuance Project, that's what I'm banking on. Obviously, I'm number of us who are working on this, we fully intend for this to be a cohesive next step for all these issues. And to make it a success, we want to ensure that we get everybody on board who is capable of participating. And that requires a lot of just information, disseminating of the sort that anyone can do. Anyone can get on Twitter, obviously, and push this around, send it to people they know, academics, grad students, just random people who have the ability to differentiate between good information and bad information. We're gonna have a lot of journalists using this who are gonna want to use crowdsourced journalism of the sort that we've ourselves have experimented with over the past years. There's a great deal of knowledge bases out there that regarding how the internet can be used. We're trying to collate all together and refine and disseminate it to everyone who participates. We'll be providing, we also need people who have developed open source tools. We have out of Berlin, we have Shadash, MC McGrath, who developed Transparency Toolkit. He's worked with a lot of foundations. He's been helping us out in applying for grants. His Transparency Toolkit will be integrated into this. We're developing our own tools for task management and other things of that nature, but we want to integrate all the great tools that are out there so that when people come into this, they will have access to all these things. They'll learn about what's available, what the best encryption and security tools are, what the best information collation tools are. So anyone who's a programmer out there who is, has something that they've created that's a great idea, but it's just not getting the right, sufficient attention, this is a way of getting those things in front of the people that need them. And so we want to integrate as much of our existing infrastructure and as much as our, our mental resources collectively into this as we can. And that's the most important thing people can do right now.
I would like to add one little thing. Thank you, Barrett. I think at the center of our fight is one thing, and that is the most important thing of all, and that is the truth. And the only institution right now in the world that can be trusted with that, with delivering the truth to the people, is WikiLeaks. So if you want to make any kind of financial contribution, this is the institution you want to support, because what WikiLeaks has done in the last decade is absolutely amazing. It has opened the eyes of the world to the crimes that are being committed by politicians against the people who voted them into power without their knowledge, in a completely criminal conspiracy against their own people. WikiLeaks is the center of our battle. And I realized that many, many years ago. And I understand that, without it, we would be all so much poorer and we would know so much less. So if you want to make any kind of financial contribution or, spend time, invest your time. If you don't have money, invest your time, join the WikiLeaks task force. Anything you can do to support the one institution of truth that we have in the world that we can rely on, support WikiLeaks.
Well said, and I completely agree. And also I'd say that nobody in this planet has done more for source protection than WikiLeaks. No one on this planet has done more for protecting whistleblowers than WikiLeaks. The organizations that have been set up, like Courage, have helped Lauri, have helped Barrett, have helped Edward Snowden, have helped many other people. And in my opinion, Courage Foundation doesn't get anywhere near enough donations or attention or support. So couragefound.org to help the people who are helping the people who are the most under threat in our movements, and for speaking truth and for educating all of us about the real state of our world and the seriousness of the issues that we face. We must support the people who the state attacks. We must support each other. Solidarity is the most important thing in our movements, or nothing else that we do is worth anything. So please do support Courage, and please do support WikiLeaks. Okay, guys, so we're going to change the program up a little bit here. So we have 8 principles that are the beginnings of our anti-spy bill. And they are things that we have identified are serious threats to the citizenry, to activists, to journalists. They are practices of both state and private intelligence agencies and contractors. And they are things that the governments have been legislating to allow themselves to do, which are completely immoral and should never have any basis in law. Now, because we believe in real democracy where everyone gets to have a say, we don't pick and choose who gets to vote. Doesn't matter if you're in prison or have been to prison or what your situation is. Doesn't matter even if you're 18 years of age. We are putting these principles up on our crowdsourced decision-making platform, which is called Lumio. Lumio is a tech cooperative based in Wellington, New Zealand. It was developed by a group of activists from Occupy Wellington back in 2011. Kim has been very supportive of Loomio. You see him nodding because he's fully across Loomio. Loomio are, of course, HTTPS and encrypted. They are completely on board with the ethics and ethos of everybody on this panel and of Internet Party. So Loomio have created a platform where everybody gets to have their say. It's a collaborative decision-making platform. So I would like now, please, for our social media team and our awesome tech manager, Joe, to post on the YouTube, the Facebook, the Zoom, everywhere, the links to the 8 Loomio decisions where everybody who is watching this now can go and vote yes or no to each of the 8 principles. And you can put a comment in as to why you think yes or why you think no. The next step was that once we have achieved consensus over whether we will adopt each of these principles, is that we would begin the draft. But the discussion that has been taking place here is so important and so groundbreaking that we've decided to continue this event as a series, and we will continue to have speakers speak every 2 weeks. And the second part, we will draft the legislation based on the decision making that we're about to do tonight. So Loomio, all you have to do is click on the links, sign up with your email address, make your username, and then vote yes or no on the decision. In about 30 minutes time, we'll tally the totals, and we will read back which of the principles have been adopted. So I will now just quickly discuss with you guys what those 8 principles are and how we have come up with them. So there has been a series of extremely draconian pieces of legislation introduced in New Zealand. When you hear us talk about the GCSB bill, what not many people realise is that was the flagship pro-spying legislation. That legislation, once passed in New Zealand, spread around the world. It became the Australian Data Retention Act. It became the UK IP bill. It became the USA Freedom Act. The principles in these pieces of legislation are carbon copies of each other. And this again leads back to what I was saying earlier about how our countries in the Five Eyes exist in name only. The agenda is the same. The central power is the same. It is not in our parliaments or even in the US Congress or even in the presidency. It is in the military. And the military agenda has been to pass this legislation around the world. And now we find ourselves in a situation where third world countries, second world countries are taking their cues on how to design their own systems of oppression from the so-called first world and from the Five Eyes. So here is what we want to do to start to counter some of that. The first principle, you may have heard of spy cops. Spy cops are police and security agents who infiltrate political and activist movements and other social groups, even some religious groups, using false or assumed identities. We are demanding that they be prohibited from engaging in sexual relationships with targets, activists, and others that they encounter during the course of their work. Known cases include spy cops in their 30s and 40s seducing activists as young as 16, and this is a case in New Zealand. The activist was 16 years of age, covertly taking and circulating nude photographs of sleeping teenage activists, living with and cohabitating with activists, multiple instances in the UK, which Lauri will definitely know about this, of them fathering children with activists, all while pretending to be people that did not in actuality exist. If you want more information, simply web search the term spy cops to read about these international references. Or you can Google, you can DuckDuckGo Thompson Clark Investigations Limited for the New Zealand specific cases, which have been horrific. The penalty for engaging in sexual relations that arise from acts of deliberate deception should be tantamount to criminal rape. as consent would most likely not be granted by the sexual partners were they aware that it was an agent of the state that is targeting and sexually propositioning them. So when you see the first principle, the link to the first principle, that is what we are proposing. We are proposing to make it completely and utterly illegal, which to me should be completely obvious, for these undercover agents to target people sexually. The second, targeting on political grounds is prohibited under international law, and it was prohibited in the original charters of the spy agencies when they were established. Yet multiple police agencies openly state on their Wikipedia pages that they are tasked with infiltrating political movements. This is unacceptable. There must be steep consequences for using police, intelligence, and security powers for political reasons. So if you agree with this, go click on the number 2 Lumio link and press yes. If you don't, press no. 3, entrapment. Entrapment is also supposed to be illegal, but it is a practice that is rife within the police and private agencies. It is used to create pretexts with which to justify political targeting, i.e. that if they infiltrate an activism or political group and can prove that they are engaged in some kind of criminal activity, then it makes it look like it was okay to target that group in the first place. Where the criminal activity doesn't exist, which is almost always, there are attempts to incite criminal activity. This is entrapment. These attempts can include resourcing, instigating, facilitating, and coordinating the illegal activity. One example of this included a New Zealand spy cop not only setting up an illegal animal welfare action and imploring other activists to attend it, but even inviting media along to document the entire thing as it happened. This is completely in line with the practices of the FBI and others who have long track records of jailing political targets by entrapping them into criminal acts. And this ties back into actually what Barrett was talking about with Sabu, who unfortunately I have some personal experience of. It is completely immoral, and entrapment should be illegal across the board. That's decision number 3. So if you agree with that, please click on the Lumio link for number 3 and hit yes. Number 4. Okay, so there have been established cases. These are really tragic cases. This was alluded to some extent in Nikki Hager's book Dirty Politics, which came out in 2014, where he had received material that proved that dozens of journalists, who he did not name in the book to protect their identities, had been targeted for political reasons, and that in some cases that targeting had included referrals to child welfare agencies. There are multiple other cases where political activists have been referred to mental health services as a result of their political beliefs and their activism. So principle number 4 is to prevent that happening. There must be an independent body appointed to review these cases and ensure that referrals to state agencies are not a result of any political interference. Any treatment or intervention received must be both valid and in line with best practices and standard treatment. They cannot be targeted for mental health treatment or child service intervention purely on the basis of political belief or involvement in activism or journalism or causes related to them. Principle number 5. All police and private agencies should be restricted from inflicting bodily harm or physical interference upon the bodies of any person at any time, except in the instance of legitimate self-defense. So these are really common sense things, right? What we're basically saying is like, these guys are supposed to protect the law and enact the law. They're not supposed to take extrajudicial measures to harm political targets, but that is precisely what has been going on. Number 6, There needs to be an outright ban on experimental weapons testing on human beings. There is a long history in defence and military circles of testing experimental weapons on humans. We see this even now, I believe, LAPD are using electronic weapons. So this issue was raised by the disclosure that electronic weapons do exist and are operationally feasible. And there is a link to the source in the Lumio description of the principle. Experimental weapons must never be tested on human beings. Weapons must be known and approved by government panel and ratified by an independent public committee prior to any use by law enforcement. Number 7, information warfare upon the public must stop. It must become illegal for corporate or political interests to pay agents to assume false identities, to pose as members of the public and post online content in favour of their employers. Any such propaganda must be clearly labelled as paid advertising. Likewise, lobbyists who appear in media as experts or opinion writers must disclose in each program, show or article whom they are being paid by. And the final one, number 8. This has come about from a recent case in New Zealand, which is really shocking. We want to ban surveillance of and data harvesting of minors, particularly relating to databases that have been shown to exist regarding truancy of kids at school. No one should have a state surveillance record prior to the age of their legal majority. Okay, so those are the first 8 principles of our anti-spying bill. They are not all inclusive. Other people will have additional ideas. Obviously, we want to ban mass surveillance. Obviously, we want to protect encryption as a human right. Obviously, the list of things we want to do goes on and on. But those are the first 8 principles that we are asking people to vote on. So please go and sign up to the Lumio, have your say, and then we will adopt those principles into the draft document in the meetings going forward. For now, I know that there are a lot of people who have been asking questions of Barrett and Lauri and Kim and haven't got to have them answered. So I think we'll use the last 15, 20 minutes to let these guys talk directly with the public and to answer the questions. Yeah, Barrett's saying in chat, Nikki Hager is great. And he spoke to him about pursuance. Nikki Hager is amazing. I believe that Julian Assange once said that a lot of the things that he has talked about in public have been directly influenced by Nikki's historical work. Nikki Hager is brilliant. He's also written for The Intercept. He has written many books about the surveillance state going back decades, so I definitely would suggest looking into them. Okay, cool. Now, we will let Blake, are you with us? Blake and Damon have been monitoring the Facebook and YouTube chat throughout the show so far, and we'll be able to field the questions from the public to you guys. Blake, you are muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yep, I think they're coming.
Awesome,
Right.
Sorry. And just to let you know, we've decided to, because we have our video issues, we're actually going to cut this into a proper edited full clip later on, and we will add in the videos from the Canadian and the Australian activists. However, we do believe we can play you the awesome comedy skit, very serious comedy skit, but also very funny comedy skit that Lee Camp has submitted. So we will close this tonight's event with that skit from Lee Camp. But for now, let's do the Q&A and let's review the Lumio participation. Go for it, Blake. If you can read out the questions to these guys, address them to who they're to, and let's try and keep to like 2-minute answers would be awesome. Thank you, guys.
From Colonel Corney on YouTube, he said to Kim, did they video you when you were showered in jail?
This is a very good question. Here's an interesting thing about my case. It's a conspiracy case. In the US indictment, they charged us with a mafia-type crime, saying that me and my software developers have basically formed a mafia-type organization to commit crimes of copyright. And what you do not do in a conspiracy case is put the conspirators together in the same jail wing, in the same jail, so that they can run around together and while in remand debate the case and basically align their stories and come up with ideas about what they could say. So I am 100% certain that they did that in our case. They put us together while on remand to spy on us. And where we were in Mount Eden prison, they have a very modern wing there where every cell has a communication system and you can basically trigger an emergency at any time and then someone will answer the call and talk to you in your cell. So they are using these systems to spy on you while you are incarcerated, and then they are putting defendants together to try and gather intelligence about the made-up conspiracy. And they must have been extremely frustrated when they listened to us, because I was sitting there in jail, and I shit you not, I was saying, what I was telling my co-defendants what I will call my yacht that I'm going to buy with the money that they will have to pay me for destroying my business. We were sitting there reading the indictment, and if it wasn't so sad and we wouldn't be in jail, it was laughable. So the only intelligence that they could ever gather was us completely destroying any allegation that was made, and not in any way sitting there and worrying about, oh my God, we're going to jail for 20 years. Those were not the type of conversations we have. And I do hope that through the court process that I'm engaged in now, we will get to the bottom of it. And I hope that we will get the transcripts of these communications. I want all the raw data of all the communications, of everything that was spied on, because if they achieve one thing, it is to show that I'm completely innocent of the charges. They have covered an entire month of my life prior to my arrest. They have listened to all my conversations, and there is not one iota of any criminal mens rea, any criminal discussion with me and my partners in my business. There's nothing at all to suggest that there was anything criminal going on. And that is one of the reasons why I'm fighting to get access to that material. The other reason, of course, is to show the amount of intrusion that happened, what technologies they have used. This is the first time where you will not see it just on a slide from Edward Snowden. Theoretically, I will be the first case to show people around the world that they've actually done it, how they have done it, and that should then lead to new legislation prohibiting this. And another reason why I want to have this data, and this is so important, I want to go after the companies that allowed this to happen. I want to go after Apple and sue Apple for allowing their software to be backdoored and allowing mass surveillance and turning an iPhone into a spy satellite. That is unacceptable, and private companies and listed companies that are engaging in partnering with spy agencies or not preventing their technologies to be abused for this kind of stuff, they need to pay. There need to be class action lawsuits against these companies, because that's the only language they understand. If they have to pay $1 billion in damages because they undermined our rights, they helped to undermine it, or they did not do enough to prevent it, then they need to be punished. So that is why I'm fighting for the raw data. There are multiple arenas that I will extend my battle to once I have that data. And yeah, that was a very good question, and I hope I answered it.
Right. Some people are asking you to talk about Seth Rich. Tell us the truth.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Here's the issue, and people need to understand why I need to be very careful about this. I have a large legal team, both in New Zealand and the United States. I have lawyers in Hong Kong and elsewhere. What is important here is that I do secure an understanding with the US government that I cannot be charged with anything that has to do with the leaking of emails from the DNC and campaign people within the DNC to WikiLeaks. I need to secure, based on my legal advice, I need to secure an agreement that gives me immunity in exchange for the evidence that I can provide. Everything that I've said is true. The statement that I've made on my website about Seth Rich is true. And I just have to go through the legal process because I'm already in enough trouble and I don't want to give them another opportunity, another way to attack me. And that's why, I have to rely on my legal advice when it comes to information about Seth Rich and his involvement in the leaking of DNC emails.
I'm just going to add a little bit to that, Blake. Internet Party put out a solidarity statement with Kim a few months ago about exactly this. And the reason that we put that out, well, there's several reasons, but primarily it is because Kim, as you know, and as you've heard on this very stream, is a massive supporter of WikiLeaks and of Julian Assange. There is no way in hell that Kim would make up or invent or lie about a story in relation to WikiLeaks, especially in these conditions. He would just never, ever, ever do it. So it was abundantly clear to us from the outset that what he was saying about this was true, or he wouldn't be making the statement. There's absolutely no way that he would put WikiLeaks in a situation of being jeopardized or anyone else. And I think that's why he's been quite conservative, rightly so, about what he will or won't reveal or when. Also, the family, as he said, did contact him and ask him not to release the information. So it's ironic that his respecting of the family's decision is then held against him. And the other thing I would say about this is that I recently wrote an article called "Someone is Lying to Seth Rich's Family About Kim.com." If you go and read through that article, amazingly about 30,000 people actually read it. It completely debunks all of the allegations made against Kim by the public statement of the Seth Rich family. So somebody had taken, well, it was very interesting actually, because smears were given to Seth Rich's family about Kim that related to events that happened in the last political election in 2014. But I was at those events. And I saw and covered and have footage of and wrote articles about and took photos of what really did happen. And what really did happen is not what Seth Rich's family are being told happened. So my article is meticulously sourced. So if you go through and read for yourself, you will discover that, in fact, someone has been lying to Seth Rich's family about Kim.com. And you might want to ask yourself some questions about why they're doing that. What is their agenda? What do they stand to gain? Especially if you realize that those people are very much in the pro-Hillary, anti-WikiLeaks crowd. And you soon discover that this issue is much bigger than just Kim. And it actually goes right to the top. So just don't take things at face value just because you're told, oh, Kim had info and didn't give it, so therefore he didn't have any. No, dig deeper and see the truth is actually a lot more complex and a lot more involved than you've been led to believe.
And what I would like to add to that is that please don't criticize me for doing the legally prudent thing. If you criticize anyone, criticize the Department of Justice and Special Counsel Mueller, who has received a detailed letter from us. We haven't even gotten any reply. How can the person who has been mandated with investigating the very issue that I'm talking about, that I'm offering to provide evidence for, how is that very person not interested in hearing from me? That is a question you should ask yourself, and that is someone you should criticize for not doing their job. Because the truth, in my mind, why they are not coming back to me is inconvenient. It does not marry with the narrative of Russian hacking. It does not work to call Trump a colluder with Russia in the last election. If the investigation body in the United States would actually look at this evidence, this investigation would be over in no time. So Mr. Müller is showing what his interest really is. I suspect he's a deep state actor, and the deep state has not expected Trump to win. They have actually moved their entire power, their media influence, their media ops against Trump, and Trump has won against the wishes of the elite establishment system in the United States. And they're trying to get rid of him. And this investigation has not done what it's mandated to do.
Just on the Russian hacking front too, I think we should acknowledge that Edward Snowden has said that he believes that there probably was some Russian meddling in the US election on the basis that this is what all of these spy agencies do to everyone. And if we look at what the WikiLeaks documents that were released a few months ago that showed the CIA's dispatch orders to the New Zealand government spies to dispatch them to the French election, to meddle in the French presidential election, we do see that, in fact, our own countries have been involved in election meddling as part of the course and even been dispatched by a foreign power to do so. However, the technical evidence has been supplied to prove that the DNC leaks were, in fact, the files were obtained locally. They were not as a result of an external hack. So Kim is entirely correct that this issue of Russian hacking has been politicized by the same people who are involved in the most serious and wide-reaching political espionage and hacking operations, and with the greatest facilities and budgets to do so of anyone in the world. So you will hear Russia, 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 hacking, hacking, hacking. You don't hear US sending New Zealand to meddle in the French election. So you really got to just take a step back and ask yourself, is this really about Russia, or is it about serving the political interests of the intelligence agencies of the United States, which unfortunately a lot of the problems that we face in this world track directly back to if you do the research and if you find the truth.
And one more important thing about that. We know from a WikiLeaks release of Vault 7 that the CIA has tools to basically create a fingerprint of any party in any hacking incident. So if the CIA goes out and hacks someone, they have the tool set to make it look like it was Russia, to make it look like it was China, to make it look like it was anybody but the CIA. So when you have these intelligence agencies issuing reports about, we believe with almost certainty that it was Russia, and then not honestly disclosing that they have the very technology to make anyone look like the perpetrator, that is the epitome of dishonesty. And it just shows that these agencies cannot be trusted. They point the finger at someone without disclosing that they have the technology to make anyone look like the perpetrator.
Blake, do you have a question for Lauri? As a listener. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Monotone Tommy said, do you believe the rise of global governance has created the issue behind the USA being able to force laws on the UK to get them to sentence you? Lauri, you're muted.
Hello. It's an interesting question. I suppose it depends what exactly is meant by global governance. To some extent, the major decisions that are made in the world now aren't really made by politicians in a representative democracy sense of having an open debate and discussion and then voting on a policy and being beholden to the interests of the people they're representing. A lot of the decisions about how the world works are made in boardrooms of chief executives of large multinational corporations who then instruct the lobbyists who control the process of politics. I might be answering a different question than the question that was asked. And the reason that it's easy to for the United States to step in and subvert the criminal justice process of the UK is because my rights and all of the rights of the people that live here were signed away by Tony Blair, David Blunkett, to in this treaty, so that the United States doesn't have to prove anything, can pluck someone on the basis of suspicion, even to a place where they can be locked up for the rest of their life, which wouldn't happen in the country where they're from. They so far have only chosen to use this, apart from in cases where there was actual criminality and someone escaped the US. It seems to be just in computer cases. I worry that would actually soon extend to, because of the new attitude of Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, to potentially the wrong kinds of activism or journalism or political organising. So this is problematic. As to what brought this into being in a governance sense, I don't think it's governance in the traditional understanding of the word. It's power relations. We call it a special relationship in the UK because it makes us feel like we're the special ones. In actuality, it's a subservient relation where we back up either militarily or diplomatically the foreign policy military adventures of the United States, or support them in other things like obstructing bad people around the world and opposing their tyrannies in places like Saudi Arabia and Palestine, etc. So I hope I answered the question, but I'm not sure I have.
I'm just looking at the comments people are making when they're entering their decisions on the Lumio threads. There's some really enlightening opinions there. Blake, do you have a question for Barrett? I think there was a bunch.
I think Renaissance Recorders asks, who are the terrorists? Who funds them and supplies them arms?
It's a complicated question that has a lot of answers. There's different outfits throughout the world that have supported what we kind of amorphously refer to as terror. Saudi Arabian government has, this is something that the British in particular have been trying very hard to suppress, but Saudi Arabians have been heavily involved with their partners, the Bush family, with a number of things throughout the Middle East for a long time and elsewhere. And there's reasons why that there are a number of different parties with different agendas and sort of mentalities that have kind of allowed for this. I mean, obviously the U.S. in the 80s helped to fund the insurgency against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and doing that, the CIA obviously has a long history of dealing with groups that we would call terrorists if they were directed at anyone other than our enemies. And so there are all kinds of, there's been a lot of great reporting in past decades on the kind of makeshift alliances that come up on the periphery of intelligence agencies. And, we've seen incidents in which terrorism has been used as a prompt for policy. And we've seen incidents in which governments, for various reasons, have made common cause with groups that they have later called terrorists or have called terrorists previously, or that other governments are calling terrorists, and hidden those connections. And so there are actual groups out there that do use bombing and sort of thing for an agenda. The IRA did it for a long time. There are Islamic groups that do the same thing, and there are also other groups that take advantage of that dynamic in order to prompt certain events that help to perpetuate certain agendas. And so I'm not an expert on that beyond what I've managed to read from by some of the, including some actual mainstream journalists that have covered these issues pretty well, but also, of course, independent researchers and others. It's not something I'm an expert on. It doesn't really interest me as much as other issues, but it is definitely an ongoing element of our this great maelstrom of global affairs, and something that's always a consideration because of that, because of what a large role it plays in our national conversations as deteriorated as those end up being. And it's a major consideration in why the U.S. in particular does the things it does, because of its image of terrorism, and because of its because of this complicated history we have, particularly in the U.S. With our global empire and the situations that we have allowed or perpetuated without our knowledge. One hand not knowing what the other is doing, the CIA operating, and with Cubans and with Salvadorian, the right-wing groups and that sort of thing, and the original jihadists in Afghanistan, or the modern breed of jihadists. And so, this is something that is always worth keeping an eye on, but it's not something that I'm really in a position to answer any better than anyone else.
Yeah.
Suzie, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I was saying I don't think we've done too bad. We're only 27 minutes over time. Pretty good considering. I think it looks like the decisions on Lumio are going to end up being all in favour of each of the principles or the beginnings of the anti-spy bill. About 50% of the decisions, about 4 of them, appear to be completely unanimous. There are some very interesting assenting and dissenting comments on the decision threads that are worth your time to read. And I definitely suggest that it'd be great if our social media admins could post the link to our main policy incubator. Then you can actually read through the discussions of our membership surrounding the policies that we are promoting in this election. There are things like banning petrol and diesel vehicles and coming up with alternatives, like do we want biofuels, do we want electric vehicles? There's a lot of incredible topics there that you just don't see normal political parties discussing very much, and you certainly don't see political parties deciding their policies based literally on the opinions of their membership and the involvement of their membership. It is truly representative democracy in that sense. However, I've made no bones about the fact that I believe that the political system is irredeemably broken, and I think we need to build a new system. That pretty much, we need to update our political system, because currently we are saddled with a political system that is centuries, if not decades old, and the only change that ever seems to happen in New Zealand is the change to the pay packet of the politicians when annually they vote themselves a pay increase at the expense of the public purse. So that is something Internet Party is trying to change, and we have learned already that by standing up and having a voice, we influence the other political parties. Every time we come up with a new initiative or we innovate something new, the other parties are watching, and they do feel the burn. They feel the pressure to up their game to be able to keep up with us. And we've had a situation where policies that we suggested in 2014 and were ridiculed, raked over the coals for even daring to discuss, are currently on the table for adoption by the sitting government. So we've shown that just having that voice can help to evolve the society and can carry across to other people, and that it does spread. We do have a sphere of influence regardless of how many votes we actually get at the election, and that is more than good enough reason for us to do what we are doing regardless of whether we achieve electoral success. So from my perspective, when I was first asked to come on as leader, I was not told get 5% and get in parliament and win this election. I was actually told the opposite. I was told build a movement for 2020, for 2023, for 2026. Build a future for this party and a future for our country. plan for the decline and fall of the red team versus the blue team, the Coke versus Pepsi elections that we suffer from right across the Western world, and I mean really globally. Because those guys are going down, their media systems are going down, their tech systems are going down, and they are going down, and ultimately they will lose grip on the apparatus that they currently have. And piece by piece, you know, like who was it who said earlier, this is a war? Was it Kim, I believe? It's an information war. It's an information war. And the more that people learn about the truth of what is going on, the less tolerance that they have for being perennial subjects of the current political paradigm. So we have got to continue to speak and have a voice and come up with new ideas and new initiatives. And we don't need to ask approval from the current system. We get on and lead and show them this is the way we're going forward, with or without you. And soon enough, they change their stripes, they change their spots to try and fit in with us. So that's really the last word I have for you guys tonight. I'm really proud of everybody who spoke. I felt when Lauri was talking like Aaron Schwartz was here on the stream. He is saying exactly the things that Aaron said, and he's saying it from his heart. This isn't something that he's regurgitating, it's something he lives and something that he believes, and that all of us do. All of us live and believe it. I would also point out that every single person on this stream either has been to jail or is facing jail or is living in exile because of what has been done to us, being persecuted by the system. And we are still talking, and we are still fighting, and we are not giving up. So do not fear the system. Do not fear the repercussions. Many times I have been called a radical, but the system radicalized me, because when I saw what they do to everyday ordinary citizens who attempt to exert democratic and political rights that are enshrined in international law and in our Bill of Rights in New Zealand, when I saw the immoral and disgusting and criminal treatment that was meted out, that is what radicalized me. When I see what is done to Lauri Love, that is what radicalizes me. And that is why this system that they have created is self-perpetuating. They will never get rid of the radicals, because the system creates the radicals. And until the system stops persecuting people in the ways that you're seeing happening, there will be more radicals and there will be more change, and the decline of the system will escalate, it will accelerate. So step up and be with us. We're building systems for you guys to engage with us as quickly as we possibly can. Use any of the channels that have been given to you to get on board, be it with pursuance, be it with helping Lauri Love in his case, be it with supporting Kim, be it with supporting Internet Party. Internet Party is embracing volunteers from all around the world. We have expat New Zealanders, Kiwis that haven't wanted to live in New Zealand for years are engaging with and supporting our campaign. We are operating on a tiny, minuscule fraction of what our political opposition is. They have millions of dollars. We are lucky if we can afford toothpaste. And you guys anywhere in the world can donate to the Internet Party up to $1,500 without having to be a formally registered donation. If you want to donate more than 1,500 New Zealand dollars, you do have to be a registered donor. In order to fund our entire campaign and to actually buy, because these days you have to buy space, and not just advertising space, but if you are not a paid advertiser with the media, they will not even mention that you exist. So for us to get our messages and get our proposals and our policies and our people and our voices into the mainstream press, we do need to have money. So if you are willing to donate to Internet Party, please go to internet.org.nz. If 400 people donate us $1,500, we can fund our entire national election campaign. So if you'd like to step up and be one of those 400 people, or if you want to give us $10 or $5 or $2, we will be very grateful for it. And know that not only will we be using that money to fund our campaign, but to continue our work to support whistleblowers, to protect whistleblowers, and to support all of the organisations that are supporting and protecting whistleblowers. Because these guys are the voice of truth. They are the light in the darkness. They are our only real hope at building a new system before the existing system brings the entire planet down. which they're doing as fast as they can. So please unite and be a part of it. And I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time, when we will bring some even more cool people, because one of the greatest moments that I've experienced in a long time was just listening to these boys talking to each other. They're just interacting. It's not just an interview in a paper or on a TV screen. They're chatting and exchanging ideas, and these are some of the brightest minds that we've got. So let's do it all again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you from the Internet Party. I deeply appreciate it. And now, when I just give our tech director a little heads up, let's watch Lee Camp's hilarious video. So Lee Camp is from RT. He has a show called Redacted Tonight. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. My little confession is that I actually don't like stand-up comedians, to be honest with you. I thought that George Carlin was about the only truly amusing stand-up comedian that's ever existed. Until I came across Lee during the Occupy movement, back when he had a show called Moment of Clarity. People are asking about Bitcoin donations. Yes, you can donate via Bitcoin on Internet Party, and if you want a different type of coin, you can also email us and we'll sort that out for you. So when Lee did Moment of Clarity during the Occupy movement, he was making people laugh at a time that they were being shot with beanie bags, less lethal weaponry, and flashbang grenades and rubber bullets and whatever else. And he would get on and do these shows and make us all laugh about what was happening to us and what was being inflicted upon us, but at the same time educate his audience, and in a really remarkable way, and use comedy to make activism more accessible to the global audience. And as his fame grew, as his reach grew, he eventually got his own show called Redacted Tonight on RT. So I reached out to Lee, and because it was God knows what, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, unfortunately he could not make it to be here with us live. However, he did a whole custom comedy skit for us, based around what Internet Party is doing, and specifically these surveillance issues and what is being done in personal privacy. So before we watch the video, I'll just let you know, because some of the content relates to this. One of the horrific bills that has been passed in New Zealand has enabled what they call domestic visual surveillance without a warrant. What that means in real terms is they can now covertly put cameras inside your house and watch you where you live without getting a warrant. So this literally is Orwell. This is Orwell's vision realized. Not like it's coming, not like we're heading that way. It's actually there in New Zealand. And it's this terrible slippery slope, because they say warrantless domestic visual surveillance if you're a terrorist. And then in the very next clause, they say, or if you are aiding or abetting a terrorist. And then terrorist is defined as threat to national security. And then threat to national security is defined as in the economic interests and the international foreign relation interests and the blah, 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 blah. Basically, it can apply to anyone. So what they start out as pushing as being about terrorists can turn out being absolutely almost anyone in the country, especially when you put in the 2 hops consideration, where any target they go within 2 hops, everyone the target knows and everyone that they know. You literally, in a country as small as New Zealand, can be putting domestic visual surveillance cameras inside half the homes in New Zealand. And this is definitely where they're going with it.
This, by the way, they don't even have to install anything in your house. Each person today in their entertainment devices, phones, you need to count these cameras in as well. What they are saying is we can activate your cameras in your house that you already have to spy on you without a warrant.
Precisely.
Yep.
Precisely. So this, Lee finding out that this had happened in New Zealand, and of course, like it has with the GCSB bill, this will spread throughout the world, and in 10 years' time, they'll just say, look, why do we even need to put this in? We'll just have cameras in everyone's house, and that will save us money, or whatever excuse that they come up with. We really are heading to 24-hour global surveillance of every facet of your life and of your existence, and this is what we're trying to fight against.
Regarding cameras in everyone's house, why do you think they've normalized voice assistants? Why do you think you have have a hot microphone on connected to the internet and you call it a nice friendly name like Alexa or Siri, all of that voice data goes to a server where it's transcribed and so it becomes text, and I'm sure it gets put in a database somewhere. So it's being normalized, and you see it all the time in subtle
right.
steps.
And in the terms of service of all of these services, you agree that they can store your data and process it to get to know you better. But at the same time, that data is, of course, available to the deep state.
Can I actually make a suggestion at this point? This is something the Internet Party should maybe write a proposal for as a policy. Terms and conditions are a joke and a travesty, and there needs to be something like the Creative Commons license to simplify the rights you're giving away, like the Android permissions. You know what you're giving it the permission to do. That should happen, and there should be none of this implicit signing away your life, allowing them to strip mine your personal data, to commoditize and productize and sell you off, and have voting dossiers built about you, or have suspicious political person dossiers built about you just because you wanted to share some pictures of cats. We need to change that arrangement and come up with a better model so that people protect their rights and can bargain for the information, which is worth money and worth power.
Lauri, pitch it in the policy incubator. You can start a thread and you can put all of your ideas, and then you can have, I promise you, tons of people will contribute to the discussion and will flesh out your ideas, and then they'll put in links and references, and then eventually we can come to create a decision based on it and adopt it as a policy. Because you are completely correct. It is almost like a race between whether the advanced surveillance is coming from the police and security state or from the commercial sector, because the two are married. They are completely married. And that's why you see the executives from one moving back and forth, because and also the monetization of the surveillance and the spying. The business interests and the state security interests are completely married, and to the detriment of the public. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Joe.
The ultimate goal in all of our efforts, from an anti-spying bill moving forward, has to be a digital charter of human rights, something that every government would agree to, and that has to be what is coming out of this effort ultimately, I hope.
We actually did have an already standing policy from 2014 that we would craft exactly as you say, a digital bill on human rights. I completely agree with you, because it needs to be something, as you say, that can be adopted globally. But I think how advanced the legislation is in New Zealand, with 4 bills over the last 4 years, which have pushed us literally to legalized Orwell. Definitely we should, it's natural to me that it's starting in New Zealand, but we should create it in a way that it can easily be replicated. And also I'd point out that Pirate Parties International, who we've been working with, are now a member of the UN ECOSOC. So perhaps we need to petition the UN on this issue as well. There are many issues with the UN, believe me, especially even in the New Zealand context, and them being admitted to the Security Council and basically being a proxy US vote. However, I still think that international law is, on paper, even though it isn't enforced, international law is a really good starting point for trying to rein these governments in, because these governments are international governments and they do operate across the borders. They do violate the borders and the sovereignty. Okay, but that's another 3-hour discussion in and of itself. I'll pass over to Joe. I want to say thank you to all you guys. Thank you, Kim, for fighting back against everything that they've done. I can't imagine what my country would be like if you had not taken the stand that you have. And I'm proud of the New Zealand activists who've stood up and stood by you for all of these years. It was the right decision, and we're going to keep doing it. And thank you, Lauri, for being such a beautiful person and all of the incredible thoughts that you were sharing tonight. I had people texting me going, I'm in tears, because literally they connect to you speaking from the heart and speaking your truth. And thank you, Barrett, for making everybody piss themselves with laughter while you were in jail and suffering. You were still bringing light to these issues when you had every reason to say, F it, I'm not having any more to do with this. You went completely the opposite way. You caned them even when you were in prison. you caned them so badly that they wanted to get you out of prison so that they didn't have to continue being exposed. So thank you so much for everything, and thank you all for being here. It's been an amazing experience, an unforgettable experience. Okay, Joe, let's see Lee Camp and then let's sign off for the night. Thank you all, and we will do this again in 2 weeks.
One last thing.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Everyone tweet at Julian, tweet at Ed. In 2 weeks, Ed Snowden and Julian have to join us because we need their voices heard as well. Their input is so important in this whole thing. So everyone just send a message to them and say, hey, tonight was awesome. You got to be there in 2 weeks.
It's been such a fantastic night, and I'd like to thank you all for putting up with some of the tech glitches that I've been responsible for. Trying to manage this stuff has been awesome. So what I'm going to switch to now is this video, and if it all goes wrong, I will switch my audio over, but here goes.
Hey, people of the world.
Do we have audio?
Good to talk with you.
He says.
I'm Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight, and thank you for giving me this chance to speak just for a moment.
Last words, that's all right. I feel bad for not giving these guys last words from Barrett.
Hello, New Zealanders. Yeah, I just want to reiterate again that there's been a great deal of progress on the. There's more people today that are potentially radicalized that really have no choice but to be radicalized because of what's been more observable about our society in the U.S. in particular, and and that's an extraordinary window of opportunity, and the time has definitely come to provide an option for those who are opposed to these systems and want to do something about them but haven't been given the tools. Now we have to give them the tools. That has to be our main priority. If we do that, we're going to see a worldwide formidable sort of organic organism rise up, capable of confronting these criminalized institutions as necessary. And that involves integrating all of our projects, all of our efforts into something whereby we can truly collaborate to the same extent that our criminalized governments are collaborating today. We have to have that same level of apparatus in front of us that they do. If we do that, then we'll be fighting institutions that, again, grew up in a different environment and they can't take advantage of this environment, that aren't built for this environment. And as happens with natural selection, we will eventually prevail. We just have to ensure that we're taking full advantage of what we have on offer. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Lauri, what are your final words for us?
I just want to thank you all very much for having me on. It's been a great honor to talk with you. It's been the most inspirational and interesting discussion I've had in quite some time. And I'm very optimistic because of what we've discussed, that everyone watching this will recognize the immense power that they have and the immense potential that they all have as individuals, and even more collectively through working together, through solidarity, through the tools and potentials of the internet, and creating those tools, as Barrett says, that none of these people that have come into such prominent roles did it because they had power or because they came from positions of influence or because they had wealth. They did it because we are all empowered to do the right thing. And if we do the right things in the right ways, effectively through skillful means, through adherence to the truth above all things, and with solidarity and with ingenuity and with technology that we have at our hands and we can still create, then we will win. We are the indigenous people of the internet, in that this is the world that we understand and we can see its transformative potential, and the people trying to control it are trying to import an outdated worldview and outdated systems of control and centralized power and authority and ignorance and manipulation that just won't work here. As Barrett suggests, the ecological niche for this kind of way of controlling people is not suitable here, and more decentralized, more representative, more participatory, more meaningful relationships between every individual and the rest of the world are what we will fight for and what we will achieve. So we just have to keep going, and we'll get there. It's going to be great, but thanks for having me on. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Kim, the party exists because of you. Go on, have the last word.
Well, I just want to say I love the internet. I think that without the internet, the world wouldn't be as fantastic as it is today. We are all connected. There are no borders anymore. We are all friends. We can all come together. We can work together. We can socialize. We can force a movement. And that's why it is so important for us to fight for internet freedom, because this is the last thing that they haven't grabbed control of yet. They are controlling our media. The elections that we have are fake because it doesn't matter who you vote for. They are all the same deep state actors. Politicians lie to us. The bureaucracy can be turned against us to destroy us if we say the wrong thing. The internet is the last true way for us to fight back and to find out the truth and to find people that are like-minded. It accelerates our evolution. We are smarter because of the internet. We develop drugs and solutions faster than ever before. All of humanity has been improved because of the internet, and they are trying to destroy it. They are trying to control it, to censor it, to control us, to know everything about us. And if you love the internet like I do, you need to fight back.
Thank you so much, you guys. Okay, I've just been told that yes, this is going to work. Famous last words, is it, Joe?
Hey, yeah. So just bear with me because I'm pretty sure. Yeah. See, I'm so good at this stuff that I can pipe my audio around so I can't even hear it myself, even though it's streaming out the other end of the cable. So here we go. Here is Lee and a notification from my supervisor. So we have audio, and the audio is going to go out a place called audio device number 2. The stream will carry audio device number 2 to the masses listening in YouTube land, and I'm going to hit play. But to make things even better, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that video with the rest of you. All right. So we're ready to go. And I'm going to just hit play and just pray or something.
Hey, people of the world. Good to talk with you. I'm Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight, and thank you for giving me this chance to speak just for a moment.
Someone has got audio. In YouTube land, they have audio.
This event is for. I want to thank Suzie Dawson and the Internet Party of New Zealand for giving me this chance, as well as Pirate Parties International. But this is important, right? This is important that we've gotten together to talk about this. Now, they wanted me to submit a video, and I said, couldn't you just tap into what the CIA is filming of me walking around my house on a daily basis? Couldn't you just get the video from them? Huh? Couldn't you have them send you a VHS? Right? They're probably still using those. And no, they said no. They wanted this thing. They wanted me to talk to you rather than just the footage straight from whatever cameras the CIA is currently using. You know, but it's good because this one will have less of me dancing in my underwear. So this is good. This is good that I get to talk to you like this. Thank you, all of you, for caring about this issue, for caring about the government intrusion in our lives, in our homes, in our everyday ability to communicate with each other. This is crucial. This is so important, and each of you has realized that. And so that's the first step. So you can pat yourself on the back for that. Something I wanted to bring up in this conversation that doesn't really get talked about, we're talking about the laws, whether this is legal, what our governments in various countries are doing by spying on us, by collecting all of our communications, all of our information. And you never even hear this talked about here in the U.S., that the Third Amendment to the Constitution here in the United States reads as such: no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Now, this amendment is not talked about often. It's never really used in much legislation. Apparently, the Supreme Court has never really used it, and it's not thought about much anymore, because it dates back to a time when, that could happen more often, that a soldier that they just walk in and be like, hey, we're commandeering your futon. And you're like, not the futon. Wipe off your boots before you come in. The cat, you're going to scare the cat. It was like a whole thing back in the day. Nowadays, that doesn't happen that often. So you don't hear this law brought up. But here's what I think is missed. Is this law, this amendment, isn't just saying that the soldier can't sleep on your couch. It's also saying, hey, the government shouldn't be in our homes when we don't want them there. That's what the founding fathers of the United States were trying to say, because they couldn't have envisioned this thing. They couldn't have envisioned all the technology and the television and everything. So they didn't think of it that way. They were just like, hey, we don't want a soldier standing over us watching everything we do. We want some privacy. We should be entitled to live our lives without people staring at every goddamn thing we do, especially the government. And so that's what this law, this amendment says, is you have a right to not have the government in your house. And yet, what have we seen but the government in our houses, in our homes, in our lives, in every way possible? Despite what Edward Snowden has revealed and so many other noble heroes have given up their freedom to reveal, the breadth of the NSA spying and the Five Eyes spying, despite all of that, we have largely not changed things. There have not been more restrictions really put on these abilities of governments and spy agencies to view everything we do in our lives. And of course, most of you probably know that, and that's why you're involved in this event. That's why you're here, and I think it's so crucial what you're all doing, and the fact that we're standing up and we're alerting people to this is the most crucial thing. Again, I wanna thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak and allow my voice to be heard along with yours, and to give my support for all of the brave people, the people that have stood up, the whistleblowers that have stood up and given up at least a degree, if not all, of their freedom to alert our society to what's going on. And just half of this battle is just keep doing what you're doing in terms of alerting everyone to this and showing them they should be angry, showing them they should be furious. Stay angry, because people, it's amazing that you'll reveal this. Oh, you're being spied on. Hey, just the other day it was leaked that the CIA is turning on smart TVs and listening in on people's conversation. And the number of people I speak to that are like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you ain't got nothing to worry about. You just don't do nothing wrong. No, you don't have to be doing anything wrong. You don't have to be doing anything horrible. You don't have to be a terrorist for you to be against this endless intrusion into our lives. The government will turn against anyone that tries to out them for what they're doing, for the rule of the corporatocracy, the oligarchy. Anyone who's threatening to that, it could be you know, you've revealed all your information, all your life is out there to be seen and abused and taken advantage of. So you don't have to be doing anything wrong, right? Who's deciding what is wrong? And yet, the more this technology is allowed to be used for spying on us, the more people do, I'm not doing anything wrong, you know? Like, I've got a friend with a smart umbrella, right? It's an umbrella that knows the weather, and it texts him and it tells him to bring the umbrella with him when it needs to, when the weather's gonna be bad. And it used to be that if you said to someone, hey, my umbrella's listening to us, they would slowly back away and then sprint for the hills. But now I feel like if you say to people, hey, my umbrella's listening to us, a lot of people go, well, stop saying important stuff in front of your umbrella. What's the problem? Just don't talk about important things in front of the umbrella or the toaster or the TV or the computer or the phone. No, that's not what it should be. We should be angry. People should be angry about all of this intrusion. We gotta end this. Hashtag anti-spy bill. All right, well, I don't want to keep you any longer. You guys have important work to do, and I'm just here cracking jokes. But in all seriousness, I'm proud to even be able to speak with all of you who are standing up and saying enough's enough. So, as I've been known to say on my TV show Redacted Tonight, keep fighting.
Awesome. That's just epic. All right, well, we're gonna head out. Fantastic.
Thank you, Joe, for setting all of this up. Appreciate it.
Yep, I've tried. It's been fantastic. See ya.
Thank you all.